Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, the finale for Season 2, which is very, very exciting. I just said an extended hello to everybody in the chat on Twitch and YouTube. We got lots of people hanging out and extra people today because Maxon was very generous, and they are donating a one-year subscription to Maxon One for this episode. And specifically, Maxon One is their new bundle, if you're not familiar. The Maxon One bundle is so that you can pay one price and get Cinema 4D, Redshift, and Red Giant Complete all together. So we'll be giving away a one-year subscription to that if you are live here in the chat. And I will be giving away a free copy of the Recall plugin, the very first plugin that we developed. I've got a little demo on that I'll be doing a little bit later on, but it is a workflow tool for Cinema 4D, and I'm very excited about that as well. Today, as I said, is the finale. This is 36 episodes this season, which is quite a few, more than usual, I think. And season 3 will probably pick up sometime in January. I don't have a specific date. In addition to that, I'm going to be presenting for Maxon during their Adobe Max live stream. So I am looking forward to that as well. For the most part, though, we are just going to be answering Cinema 4D questions live from the chat. You never know what you're going to get. And I am excited. We've got links coming in already. So why don't we begin to do that? Share the screen. I've got Cinema 4D. Actually, I got 2 copies of Cinema open because I'm going to have to do something late, a demo in 22, but that's for later. Anyway, there are some people seconding questions, which is always nice. If you see a question that somebody else is asking and you think it's really good, feel free to second it. So let's see. I'm going to assume if you second it, then make sure if you are putting the link, make sure you put the same information as far as a question. But let's see what we got here. This is something. Oh, I saw this today. Is there audio? Oh, yeah. Okay. It's turned off. I saw somebody do this today when I was quickly scrolling through. So this is from Ben Watts, specifically Ben Watts Design, and they were doing a little R&D on a Venom effect. And I have to say that I was super curious about this effect even back when the Sam Raimi, the third Spider-Man came out, and this is the effect as it's like crawling up the arm of I forget what the Brock. I think it's something Brock. I don't know. The third Raimi Spider-Man is the worst of the 3, but this effect is really cool. Now, having said that, first of all, this is Houdini, so I'm trying to think of how I might possibly tackle this because I don't have great ideas right now. Let me think. Like it's in this gorgeous R&D. So great job, Ben Watts. Let me think. I mean, yeah, is it Eddie Brock? Yeah. Okay. I was right with Brock at least. The tricky part, there's a lot going on here because here's where it gets tricky. You'll see that any one line that shoots out is fine, but then it also will fall to the ground. So this isn't something like just tracing a particle because then we can't get it to fall to the ground. Cinema 4D, you can't change point counts with our dynamic systems. It always has to be, it already has to fully pre-exist before that happens. So then some of it turns into, so that's one limitation. Let's just leave it as that. And then as we look at some of these other effects, you'll see that there's different connections between them. Now, looking at this specific effect, it almost seems like maybe that they are not. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting it to play again. Let me refresh. It almost seems like we get some straight lines and they don't see that line. It's not spitting out extra tendrils. And then there's additional ones that already seem somewhat complete. So to tell you the truth, with the effect that they're going for, it might be a little bit more simple than I initially thought in that, well, how do I put this? Well, let's jump into cinema and look at some basic things and then think about ways we might be able to make the effect because I don't fully have it in my head. But here is one thought. What if I'm trying to think of the most dynamic way of doing it would be, because it almost seems like to me that we could pre-build a lot of these assets. So if I were to go to a top view, you can click your middle mouse button and then zoom out and I don't know what my scale is. Let's make a cube. So there's a cube. That just gives me an idea of my scale. So I'm going to click at the 0 point and then trace something out to, let's just say there. So pretty big. Hit escape and do essentially the same thing on the other side. So let's just say that that is, I don't want them to connect, but they're going to. That is an initial line. And then the thought seems to be here. Let me hit escape. Yeah, I should be able to hit escape as long as I don't go to an edge. It almost feels like we might be able to do something like this, where we can just kind of draw one of these out. And I'm going to be relatively sloppy here so that we don't have to spend too much time on it. And I can just keep on drawing a series of these. Now, we could probably build some sort of rig that would do this really nicely for us. I'm trying to think if there would be what the best way to do it would be. And let me just, and as we start doing it, I could actually start interconnecting between some of these. Once again, it's just kind of the visual of it. So that's sort of a thought, is like, okay, we do something like that. And now that we have these splines, if we were to allow them to be subdivided to the proper amount, and I honestly don't know if they need to be, but here's the beginning of the thought, is we could create I suppose I'll make a connect object. Like making a connect, I can throw the two splines in under the connect to make them one object to be treated as a single spline, which makes it really nice for using a volume builder, where I could drop this connect in as a singular object. And it's easy to add things to this as a child. Now that that is created, I could increase our voxel resolution by decreasing voxel size. The radius is a little bit big. I'm going to increase our density and decrease our radius. And you see that we'll get thinner. Drop this down to 3 is too far. The number really can't get smaller than our voxel size. So I'll drop that down to 3 and then put this entire thing into a builder. Hold down Alt as I create a volume builder. And now this should, a volume mesher. That will become actual geometry that you see here. So that's fine. I like that. You'll see it's actually relatively low resolution, which is nice. Typically, I've been doing, what I've been enjoying doing is expanding this beyond that. So we could inflate this. Let's jump this up to a larger radius of 5. Even going way beyond that, we could jump this up to something like 8, which is pretty fat. But then putting in a smooth. So we put in the smoothing effect. And if we make it weak enough, it should start deflating it a bit. And you see how you get this really nice kind of oozing effect on that? So that can be really nice. The problem is that the smooth is really long to calculate overall. So let's try not using the smooth effect. Instead, using the smooth deformer, which actually calculates really quickly. So I'll try the smoothing. That can go underneath the volume mesher. And it's currently got a stiffness. So if I change the stiffness, we could lower that, and I can increase the iterations. As that increase the iterations is going to repeat again and again and again and again, the effect. And you can actually see it's doing a similar thing, pinching it out, and we get something a little bit more oozing. So that's not too bad. Now we change the effects. So I think I could shrink this smaller. So yeah, if we drop this down to something like 4, you can see we get something really kind of tight and oozing. And then from this point, we could say, okay, don't do that many iterations, or pull back the strength on this a bit, or decrease the individual iterations. And you see that will get skinnier that way. Something I kind of like doing, though, is letting it pinch out to this very small state like this, and then creating a displacer, or even better than the displacer, because it's slightly quicker to calculate, would be a plane effector, but treating this plane effector as a deformer. So I'll tell this to deform as points. It's going to super crazy explode. We can chill that out by going into the parameter. And I want every point not to move out on Y. So I'll zero that out. Instead, I want to move out on Z. And I can increase this, and it just becomes a way of reinflating that. So by reinflating it to some relatively small number, you can see that I've given those super pinched out lines some minimum distance. So you can kind of see how those combine. Now, the advantage of using this plane after the fact is, well, first of all these lines will get very evened out because they all got really skinny, and now I'm telling them to reinflate. But under the fall off, I can also add in a random field, and this random field is automatically based on noise. And let's go and exaggerate this more so we can see it blatantly. I could keep on inflating this more, and you can see that based on the noise field in the fall off, that these different parts will get thicker and thinner. So that can also work pretty well to our advantage, where I can make these larger. You see how the blob is moving through in different areas, so we can make it way smaller. So in this case, I'd probably be inclined to make a large one like that and then duplicate it. So good idea at this point to say random field small, random field large. And now make sure the plane effector is being fed the large and being fed the small. Set that to be additive. So they're adding together. And this small one now, actually make it small. So now I should hopefully, actually, let's unclamp it as well so that they add on top of each other. So now you can see I get these tiny bumps and the big bump. I can pull back on the strength here so we get the small one or the big ones. And now you can see the small ones start to add variation on top of that. And now that we've got that, I could remap this however I wanted to. So in this case, I could do something like create my favorite modifier layer, which is, well, not my favorite, but my go-to is a curve. So this curve can be used to remap this effect. So I can start pinching this in. You'll see that, the effect will be a lot stronger in certain areas. And now that we get this overall effect, now I can say, okay, now I can see it very blatantly under the plane effector. Let's make it not quite so strong or blatant and pull that back a little bit. Honestly, what's not unusual for me to do either in this case would be to expand that quite a bit and then use a second smoothing deformer. But this one will be a lot weaker. I'll do, let's see, this is 0. Wait, I can't do 0. So that's 0 iterations. Here's 1, and you already see it's a lot smoother. And then do 2. And actually 2 is doing a pretty nice job where we're expanding it quite a bit, but then bringing it back to not being too chunky. And now you can see how we pretty quickly made something that's kind of oozing, kind of looks oozy and blobby. And it's a pretty simple stack that we have here. So I will save this scene file. And as I always do mention in times like this, you get access to these scene files if you're supporting on Patreon. So I'll save the scene file as, let's say, Venom 1.c4d. Actually, it's 1a, not Venom 1. Got to stick to my naming convention. All right, now, so that's kind of the building this blob thing, but obviously that's not the exciting part. This is, oh, Eric is asking, what is my favorite modifier layer? Because I started to say this was my favorite. My favorite has to be Decay, because Decay added so much new functionality. Like, we already had Delay, and Delay is amazing, and it's great to be in here, but Decay really gave us something new. Now, I'm not sure if any of these effects will end up living through the rest of this, if we can make this work at all, because we'll probably be passing through the noise, and I wouldn't want to do that. So we'll look at that a little bit later. The point being is, if we simplify this back down again, in fact, I should be able to simplify this back to just being a spline. My thought is, what if we, I'm still a little stumped. How do I make those fall? It shoots out and then they have a trail. Okay. We do have X particles here, and I might use it, but man, when we start using X particles, this turns into like a 2-hour thing, because man, X particles is the way to go very often. The trick is, it just ends up being that I don't get to answer very many questions, because you have to be very meticulous when you're working with X particles. And the more I can keep it vanilla, I tend to like to do that when possible. Now, having said that, let's build the very basic version of this rig, but I can't easily in vanilla cinema make a particle emit from a particle. You can with thinking particles. But that would be more complicated than X particles. X particles was made as a replacement to thinking particles, because the person who made it didn't like dealing with thinking particles. Sky XP is not using the node system yet. There are no particles in there quite yet. Eric and Lucas, I do agree it would be great to go with X particles, but like I said, that it ends up being not great for a big audience of people. So let me think of, I could do singular ones. I mean, we might have to go with it, because let me show you conceptually what I'm thinking, but I have to manually keyframe things to show this. If I were to do something like create a sphere, here's the thought, and this is what we will end up doing with X particles if we go that route, but man, I am worried that it's going to go down a giant rabbit hole. I'll do the simple version here just with a single tendril, because what we need to do is have something that can fly out sort of dynamically and then and then have a line fall to the ground, kind of like ooze down to the ground. I wonder. No, each one needs its own emitter. That's where it gets tricky. Yeah, I don't even know. I'm not even sure I know how to do this with X particles, to tell you the truth. But in any case, let's just say, let's keep it nice and slow. I'm going to say at a time of 0, it's here, and then at the time of 90, it's traveled out to there. So all good. I'll keyframe that again. And then just to keep it simple, I'll pick a midpoint so we get an arc from it. So that is going to do this not amazing arc traveling up and then down. So it's kind of like this initial blob that shoots out. Having done that, I could create a particle emitter. So we'll start with a simulate particle emitter, make that a child of the sphere. I want it to emit, I'm going to say 30, which should be 1 particle per frame. I think a lifetime is fine. Speed, I want a speed of 0. That's important. Then emitter, I want it to be very small, so 0 by 0. All right, so the idea here is as this flies, you're going to see a trail flying behind it. Okay, that's all well and good. Now, where this gets interesting is we can add gravity to this, add some sort of modifier. That's simple enough. Spline, and actually these are the old style particles, so we could keep this pretty simple. Adding a force, I'll tear this off for a moment because I want gravity. So by doing that, now as that flies, you'll see a trail falling. And then I can create a super duper old school deflector, lay this flat on the ground. And do they have a scale? Oh, yeah, they do. Okay, the scale is way up. So that's now a scale, or a scaled up deflector. And I want bounce of 0. So having done that, now as this shoots up through the air, these particles will fly and then fall to the ground. You can see how that's seemingly working pretty well. All right. So having done that, how do we make that into something interesting? Well, here's the thought. What if we create I'm going to select the emitter and create a MoGraph tracer object. So that's already feeding in the emitter. Hitting play, you'll see each line has a trail, but I don't want a line. I want to connect, connect all objects. There we go. By connecting all objects, you now see that's creating a connection from one particle to the next. So now we actually have a trail that will fall down to the ground. And, kind of out of the gate, that's pretty cool. It's working pretty well. Yeah, maybe we'll keep this a simpler version like this, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm creating this trail. It's continuous. It looks pretty nice that way. And we could have that terminate at any point. And honestly, we'd probably want it to terminate somewhere like around here. So emitter, stop emission frame 80. So that would then stop and everything will fall to the ground. I'll give us a few extra frames and you'll see it automatically jumps to the long length because it's R23. So you'll now see a trail and all that will settle down right there. So we get this nice arc and the trail. Okay, now that we have a trail, the hope is, what if we can tell this connect object to map onto that? So this could be a simple tendril we get by itself, but now let's pull it a level further. Actually, I'll save it first. 1B. And we'll probably need to subdivide this, but before we do, let's keep it real simple and do a not spline rail, spline wrap. So here's a spline wrap. So taking the spline wrap, making it, I can probably make a child of the connect. But you know what? I'll put the connect into a group. So that is now in a null. Create the spline wrap. Make that a child also of that. You can see that I'm on Z plus is my direction. So I want this to map onto the tracer on Z plus. Now you can see that indeed it is mapping onto it, but as I said, I thought we need to subdivide, and indeed it seems that we do, because these are not heavily subdivided at all. Now we might be able to do it sort of easily. I don't want to lose a copy of this. So you know what? Well, this is a good chance to use recall. So I'm actually going to right click on this connect and say, I want a recall tag. This recall is a tool that I developed here at Rocket Lasso, me and my brother. So by creating this tag, I can double click on it and store that current state. So I can always come back to that if I need to. I'm actually going to be grouping this. So hit Alt G. I'm going to move the recall tag onto that, because I think if I change these splines to their intermediate points to being subdivided, then they should become very subdivided. Now, I'm trying to think of the best way we can visually see this. I suppose it might be putting that into a sweep. I just want to visualize this for everybody watching. Sweep an end side. So now I'm just sweeping this end side. But the point being is because I set those splines to subdivided, you can now see how they're very evenly subdivided all the way down the line. So if I were to increase this or decrease it, you can see I get more. Oh no, I just accidentally, oh no, well, I did save recently, but I'm trying to fix it. I accidentally went to a really tiny number. That's dangerous. Don't drag that all the way down to 0.001 because it makes an insane number of subdivisions. So yeah, that can be a little risky there. Okay, that is better now. I can actually put the angle up to 90 so it's not subdivided too much. And now you can see how it's getting subdivided. Actually, I'm going to grab my recall tag and override it. So it's storing that in the new state. Actually, that's not true. I want it to be stored not with the sweep. So there we go. Now I will override it. Now that I've done that, if I take this connect and make it editable, it will bake those. Oh, maybe the connect doesn't do that. That's a pain. I guess they are still subdivided. I'm curious if the wrap can handle it subdivided like that. Let's just find out. Oh, it can. I don't have to make it editable at all. So I can double click the recall tag, bring it back to the not made editable state. And that should bring this back, turn this on to map onto this one. And I can see that our new line is traveling along this one, which is fine. It needs a direction. So we have a rotation here. I'll give it an up vector of 1. Nope. Let's try doing 1 here. Yeah, there we go. It was X, Y, Z. So I gave it an up vector on X, I guess because it's facing on Z, and now X is the up vector. I'm not entirely sure. I was just guessing until it worked. But the point here is you can see this is mapping onto that line. So if I were to rewind and hit play, that line is now traveling that path and deforming itself down to this ground level. It's actually working pretty well for how quick we were throwing that together. Yeah, that's not too bad. Now, I'm trying to think. We've got the spline wrap. We could animate the strength here or do an offset of some sort, like from and to, because it's kind of just stretching the entire time. I guess in some ways I'm fine with that. I mean, there's things we could do. We could scale it. We could modify it in a lot of ways. It might be a good idea to scale it. I'm trying to think of the best way to do that. Is there a way? Yeah, there's a size here. Size strength. Ooh, look at that. Yeah, I've never played with this parameter, but here's a size strength. And if we pull this down, I mean, once again, we're only making a single tendril here. And this is where if we were going to spend time, 2, 3, 4 hours in X particles, we might be able to make a better rig that could do these things automatically. But making a single one at the time of 0, I want the strength, the size strength, to be 0. So I'll keyframe that. And then at the end, well, I guess it doesn't fully settle until, let's just see, I'll hit play. And it's kind of falling. And right around now, which is around 100. So I'll just go back nice and clean on 100. Scale this all the way up will be that final strength. I don't know if that will look good, but let's try and give it a go. I'm going to hide the spline wrap because I don't like, well, I guess if I have it selected, it's going to show up in the viewport. I'll just deselect it. Hitting play, we can see it goes out. And actually, that's not too bad. It scales out pretty well. I think I might just like it to scale out a little bit quicker. So I can select the keyframe here and just pull this back to maybe frame 60. To tell you the truth, I'd probably go a couple frames early and create another keyframe here. You see that's about 90, and then stretch this out so it's really smooth. So the last bit will really slow down. That's all I did there. So now that will fly out, scale, and then splat. So that all settles in pretty nicely there. As a single little rig. I guess because we're doing it, should we? I'm trying to think, could I make, because we're doing it as a single object rig, I'd kind of like to make this actually dynamic, because why not? And we can get a better arc out of it. So I will delete all my keyframes. I can do that by holding down Control or Command if you're on a Mac, Control and Shift, and click on the keyframe. And I'll actually erase out not only those keyframes, but all the keyframes on those parameters. So that's now as if it was never recorded. Having done that, I can, let's try and make it dynamic. I'll save this again because we're making nice progress. See? Let's right click on the sphere, simulation, rigid body. Now this is actually important. We already created a deflector and a gravity. Actually, the deflector won't do anything, but the gravity will. So under forces, I'll say exclude, and I'll change that to include. So it's only going to include forces I tell it to include, meaning it is currently ignoring that gravity. If I were to hit play, it will fall, but it's because of regular cinema gravity, which is what we want. So in this case, I think, yeah, we'll just give it a initial custom initial velocity. So under the dynamics tag, under dynamics, custom initial velocity, we want to go up on Y, over on Z. I'm not sure what amounts I want. So let's say 100 on Y and just see what that gives us. Almost nothing. Let's go 10 times stronger. Boing. Okay, that's a lot, but maybe that's completely fine. I'll say 600. And now we want to go, I don't know, let's say 600 on Z because it's not fighting against gravity. Let's see. Ooh, look at that. That's lovely. Boing. So we don't have any specific way of, a couple things I'm looking at. It seems like the initial line is escaping. The first particle is at 0, so it's falling through the floor. That's fine. All we have to do is scoot up the sphere a little bit for its initial starting position. It can probably be as small as 10. So just a tiny little bit up, hit play. There, now it's not going to fall through the ground. The sphere is still falling through the ground, but it's just because everything is calculating quicker. So we'd probably just want to cut this off earlier. So the particle should stop around 36. And I think it looks better. So we'll just leave it at 36. That's fine. Emitter, stop at frame 35. And there we go. Not bad, not bad. So that is dynamic. Now we could have let that bounce, and who knows, maybe it'll look cool. Let's give that a second to do that. I'll say go for 55 frames. Create a floor. This floor will also be dynamic. And let's just let that sphere bounce off the ground and see what happens. Yeah, okay, it kind of like pulls it taut, which is funny. Now I want the sphere and the floor to have a lot of bounce. So right now there's not much bounce. So let's give it 55% bounce. Boing. Yeah, that's, I mean, I don't know if it's accurate, if it's good, but we can keep it alive like that. I don't think it's a good idea, but I just wanted to see if it would look cool. And it is neat. It's just not, it's a lot less Venom-esque. So we'll drop this down to 34 again. There we go. Should terminate fine. We got our nice little line. And let's see if this, and I'm not sure entirely that it will. We end up not needing the recall tag because we already used it to bring it back. So I can delete that. Let's see if we can feed this back into our volume. I don't know if we will be able to, especially it's in this more complicated hierarchy, but let's just try dropping it in as a whole and see what it does. Oh, okay. Like it just automatically did work, which is wonderful. Now let's turn on our smoothing. We can definitely turn on a layer of smoothing like this. And I will hide the original tracer because we don't need to see that line. In fact, we can visually hide the particle emitter as well. So that should be able to fly out. Oh, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Wow, I'm kind of impressed. So having done that, it looks like we want our gravity to fall perhaps a little bit faster. So we'll give it a little bit more acceleration. I'll jump into 444. That's not bad. Then I'm trying to think of what sort of modifications I'd like to put on this. That is not bad at all, though. That looks a lot, for how simple, the fact that we just traced out that little line going back and forth so quickly, I'm really impressed that that looks as nice as it does. I thought that we'd had to make that way more dynamic than we have. So now let's see if the deformer works. I imagine we'll be passing through. Yeah, it seems like we are passing through. That does make sense. We've got a giant cloud of noise and we are passing through that. So, and every time it's generating new geometry, this isn't mapped specifically to a spline. So I don't think that we could do this really complex deformation like I'm doing here without it jumping around. Now, because it's moving so quick, that might be fine. But you have to keep in mind that these noises will be moving as this passes through them. So you see it's kind of getting thicker, thinner, thicker, thinner in different areas. If you're okay with that, then that will work. But right now, I'm not easily able to think of a way of mapping that. I suppose if we were going to map it, would that be the way to do it? Because you get this really lovely blob happening. But what you'd have to do is deform the geometry first and then spline wrap that so that the geometry is calculated first and then it gets flung out. So this is all working quite nicely. I will save it. You know what? Why not make a quick, nice Venom-esque material? So I'll just do a regular material here. Reflectance, remove, add. GGX, and a Fresnel, a dielectric. We'll just grab something simple like an oil, oil vegetable. That seems nice. No color channel and no specular, and give it whatever roughness we want. But honestly, if it looks more slimy, that's probably all the better. Drop that on. There should already be a built-in kind of HDR in the scene, so that should reflect nicely there. And I think, are we seeing the floor? I feel like we're not seeing a floor, but if I were to drop a material in there, yeah, it's strange. Did they change it so the floors are not visible? Because it's just gray right now. Not the biggest deal. I was just going to do a little heavier contrast, but that is fine. Let's see. Yeah, so that is working just fine. I really like the way that looks. Keeping in mind that this is a volume, let's kind of wrap this into a rig, or a little bit more of a self-contained thing. We don't need that. Here's the null. I'm going to just go a web for now. So a single web would contain this tracer, the sphere, and this null. Essentially is everything that would be contained inside of a single iteration of this. Of course, that would lose the volume builder. So we have to, it's a little bit tricky, but let me just show you. If I were to drop all these inside there, in theory, I could copy and paste a second one. And actually, I'm kind of curious about this. If I were to spin that 90 degrees, do those two spheres, and I'm going to scoot it as well so they're not intersecting. Is it, okay, it is relative to its original path. So you can see now that I have two of them. So both of them will fly out and independently do their own thing. And then now I've copied it kind of as two different webs. I would need to drag these into the volume builder, but the volume builder does have two different methods we can drag things in. So if I were to drag in this null, let's see. Yeah, okay, that does work. So I could drag that in, and now I have to manually drag in the other one. So now we do get two of them. So I'm able to copy and paste that rig pretty easily. And, we can do things to modify one or the other. And what's nice about dragging both of these into the volume is that they would blob together. It might be a little bit tricky. I'm trying to think of how the best way to show it blobbing together. I suppose it would be taking this copy and just moving it off to the side like that. So at least they'll eventually overlap. Hopefully they don't collide. Nice. And now as those, that one's twisting around a little bit funky, but as it settles, oh, I probably know why. But now you can see that they do blob into each other, which is the only point I want to make there. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. You can see that we are able to copy and paste the rig, put more than one in. That's all good. I just wanted to show as a final thing, probably final. So start getting the next layer of questions ready. I just want to rearrange the order of our rig right now, so that this will actually be a child of the volume builder. And then the spline wrap won't deform. The spline wrap will not deform the splines, but instead the final geometry. So it should be essentially the exact same rig, except it's the final geometry getting traced. So what that should mean, yeah, there we go. So by rearranging the order, not even deleting or creating or deleting anything new, you can now see that these stick. Those are not moving around because now we are deforming. Let me just show you. This always exists in its final form. So now by spline wrapping that as the end result, instead of feeding that in as the initial thing, it will not mess up the deformation of these little details. And so along those lines, it would probably be nice to animate at least the small one. So this one can get some animation speed, let's say 55. And now we should be able to get a little bit of motion from there. Honestly, because we're smoothing it out, I think we could probably sharpen this up a bit. So let's push those out more. So yeah, get a little more life on that. Let's see how fast we can push this 111 for the speed. I kind of like it to be really spiky. Let's see how far I can push that. In order to see it, I'm going to turn this off yet. So I just want to see how far we're pushing these. So the thought is I just want to make these stronger. So I'm going to crank up the strength of the small, but the remapping that it has actually seems to be what's messing it up. So I guess it's actually, yeah, that sense. I need to remap the noise that I'm feeding in from the original random field small. So under remapping, I can go into its own little contour and pull this back. So we only get, you see now I'm only getting more occasional spikes, and that's really what I wanted, is these occasional spikes. So with those sticking out and being really spiky, and I can make these stronger, and you see those get really spiky. So hopefully those become a little bit more emphasized. But then when the entire thing gets smoothed, those will be a lot calmer. And now you can see that we just get that little undulation inside of it, and the big ones aren't really affected, but the small ones can stay alive. Having said that, we can also go into the large one, give it a little bit of animation speed. It's going to be a lot more blatant, so I'll keep that one slow. In addition, keep in mind, this is flat on the ground, so we could give this a direction. So like on Z, actually, the noise doesn't have a direction built in. You have to like animate it. I think it is local, so if I were to take this, you could, you see here, if I drag it, if I grab this and pull it off to the right, you see everything is traveling upward. So you'll get this effect where everything is moving up on Z. So that could be kind of cool. It even feels like they're traveling the tendrils, which is pretty neat. So, that could be something to consider. Why don't we do that? Grabbing the large field, we could keyframe Z. I should have done that at 0. At the time of 0, fast forward to the end, which is pretty far, but we want the entire thing. I'll have keyframed it all the way up to the upper part. It's just a smooth interpolation right now. It's easing in and easing out, but let's just ignore that. A little speedy. So I'll go to the end and divide it by 2, override the keyframe. There we go. That looks a lot better. So yeah, you can see that looks like it stays alive a little bit. And think about how much variation we have for changing the overall effect here. If I don't smooth this as many times, then the entire thing can be thicker or thinner. We could inflate it more or less. I could do some pretty large effects on the overall shape. Let me think. There's even on the splines. Those then it would be passing through again. But we could do. There's a lot of additional deformation that we could do even after the fact. I just thinking of ways to keep it alive a little bit. But overall, I think that's pretty cool. And I could keep on going and going and going and layering up more and more parts. But as far as a single piece of this traveling out, that's sort of the concept. It would just be starting to make more copies of this. If I were to build a rig like this in something like X Particles, I'd probably approach it in a pretty fundamentally different way. So I can't say exactly what that would look like. Throw that into a subdivision surface, only one subdivision. Slows it down a bit because there is a lot of geometry now, but it'll be a little bit smoother. And yeah, I do like this little oozing effect overall. I wonder if we could, it might throw in some dimension. I just want to, for fun, throw in a force turbulence and give it a decent scale. I just want to see if this makes the particles drift around a little bit more. Where you see how they're sliding along the ground. So the scale's too big. I'll shrink that. So yeah, these particles can actually move. You'll see as it hits the ground that these will be able to slide around and stay a little bit alive. The frequency, yeah, it's going to get really crazy. It's not horrible though. It looks kind of cool. And that's one of the, I guess that's just the way the tracer is moving, but I'm surprised at how coherent that's continuing to be. Yeah, that can keep it alive a little bit in addition. I wasn't expecting it to. But anyway, I think that will wrap that up. There's a bunch of time on one question, but I thought it was pretty neat, and I didn't know that we'd be able to do anything like what we just did. It was crazy. Yeah, and I would love to explore that deeper, but man, doing it on a live stream, we got way further than I thought we'd be able to. Let's see. Yeah, Insidium is great, and they do their plugins are amazing. Looks great. Yeah, it's also like a Spider-Man web shooter. If we thin those out a little bit and change the color, that would also be working quite well. Yeah, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. Questions coming in. I don't see any on YouTube recently, so I'll jump back to Twitch. And there's questions definitely. Paper curl. Vivix. I think it's Vivex. Yeah, Vivex is, I'm assuming. I'm going to try clicking on yours. I always like clicking on new names. And keep in mind, everybody, I will not forget, we've got some giveaways to do. I'll be doing one pretty soon. So let's try checking Vivex question. The bit at frame or the time of 14. So we got the Motion Design Awards website, and it is the Pantene Nutrient Blends. This is video of the day. Those are votes about this video. Extensive, significant collaboration between Detroit, Beta, and Gray NYC for Pantene. So let's check out what we got. You said 14 seconds in. I have to turn the audio off or YouTube will get angry. Ooh, we got crazy bubbles. Oh, we got filling up of volumes. Oh, very cool. Look at all this. Oh, gorgeous. Man, this is lovely. Some grade A motion graphics here. And you said 14, so right around now. Let's see. The leaf extending parts. Oh, it must be these leaves. Whoa! That's cool. I'm not sure about, I think that these are two completely unrelated shots, but they do transition in really nicely to each other. Let me see if there's any leaves in there. Yeah, it's just two shots, but they do, like the motion transition is really lovely. I'm assuming you just mean this effect right here. So we kind of got this torus shape. And they are sort of unraveling. I totally have some ideas of how we can do that. I just have to remember how to do it. Good question, though, and very, very amazing looking piece. I like that. How did I've done semi-similar effects in the past. I just need to remember how I went about doing it. Let's, I don't want to, well, I guess it's, we're not going to get anywhere near what they have, and they do so many amazing things in there. I don't mind trying to make a leaf really quickly and do the similar effect. So starting out, creating a plane, pinch that in. I'll worry about subdivisions in a little bit. Actually, we made a leaf last week, so this will be similar. Taper. Actually, they changed the way the orientations work. So I make a taper, face it on Z+. Z+ is always forward in Cinema, so it's always good to do that. Click Fit to Parent, and now it's going to snap to that. I can taper that on the end if I were so inclined. I could also, well, we can turn on Fillet, and that's going to change the way the bend looks. Also, we have the curve, so I can bulge that out extra if I want to. I guess I do. That looks pretty nice. Then, yeah, so that is actually part of the super basic part. So let's just call that our leaf. Then I'll create a bend deformer. Also, it will be on Z+, Fit to Parent, increase the strength, change the angle. So now I've got an angle of 90, and I'll spin it around to whatever degree that I want to, and we can see that that is working pretty well. I don't need this many subdivisions, so I'll chill out. Honestly, we don't need all those, but I'll put one in the middle regardless. So that becomes a single leaf. Now, let's put this into a cloner. So a regular Cinema cloner. That will make a bunch of clones. I don't want to see these deformers, so I will hide them. Now, that's a grid. Do I want to be linear or grid? In some ways, I do like a grid. We'll leave it on grid. And I need to have more on this X, Y, Z. So on X, we'll do that. There is 200 per unit. So that's, well, I don't care what the length is. We'll deal with that later. The mode I will change to endpoint, and that means I can increase this count, and it's not going to make more. So having done that, I can make as many of these as I want to. Then I will create a random effector. I have the cloner selected, so that will just modify the cloner directly. I don't want to affect the position, although we could. I do want to affect the scale in a uniform way. By increasing this number, immediately we should see them each scale. But what I should have done before putting this in the cloner is give this a center point, give it the proper center point. You can see the axis of this is right here. So what I'll do is put this into a null and move this and just eyeball it until that looks like the circle is centered right in, right in the center. Also, I'll probably rotate my bend so I can get a little bit of bulge out of this. You see as I rotate the bend deformer, I just have a good intuition for this, but as I bend it, it's actually twisting outward more, so there won't be as much overlap. Having said that, I'll recenter this again just a little bit. Okay, so the hope now is when I turn on my cloner, now they're all offset and they're centering from the same point, which means when they scale, then they'll be scaling from that center point, meaning that they will kind of overlap each other, which is what I want. I will turn on, actually, SSAO is on already by default. So now I want this random to add some random rotation. And I'll spin around in this orientation, and I can spin these. I guess the different scales are messing us up a little bit because each one might want to make them subsequent. I didn't think about that. That's my fault. How would I do that? I'm trying to think if I should worry about that or not, because it's going to eat up a bunch of time. I want these not to be quite as wide, so I'll shrink those down. The scale. Plane, effector, random. I'm going to delete the random, and I don't know if this will fix it, but I'm going to instead use a plane effector. Using a plane effector is surprisingly viable on almost everything, because I could turn on scale here and do a uniform scale and give it that randomness, and they'll all do it together. But now I could feed it a fall off, and that fall off can be a random fall off. So with a random field fed into there, each one is going to randomly get scaled. Now, if I make sure that all of those are getting scaled outward, I should hopefully be able to grab the rotation and randomly increase their rotation. And if I had the bend done correctly, I think that would just work. But maybe I need the scale to be negative. Okay, that mostly works, I think, because of the way I did the bend. A couple of them are sneaking out. That's not the point. I'm not worried about that. The point is now we've got a big twirl of leaves is really what I'm going for. I want a few, I'm going to actually give us some more subdivisions and more because I want that to be pretty smooth. You'll see that there's a decent subdivision on that overall. So now we've got that. Now I want these all to be spinning around. To do that, let's just do it with a cloner because it's always fun to do it this way. Adding another plane effector. I don't want to affect the position, but I do want to affect the rotation. And I want to affect this rotation. And you can see it's just spinning around in the constant direction forward. That's what I want. Now that I've increased that to some amount, I can set in the field anything I want. In this case, I will feed in time. So now it is looking at time, and it will, well, currently the shape is, it's a rate of 30. How do I make this infinite? Or is it the clamp? Okay, it's the clamp. I have to turn off the clamp. So once the clamp is turned off, this can now spin forever just because we have this time node in there. It's just a nice way of getting something to infinitely spin or rotate or scale. Given the rig that I have right now, sorry, I got a little bit lost there, but now you can see I've got a pretty simple setup going. I could increase this count to anything I want and get more or less leaves. We could add less variation to the scaling here, and then they'd all be lining up a lot more closely. So you can see that we don't need that many controls and we get a really nice layout. So now that we have this tube spinning around, this becomes as simple as creating a bend deformer. And I'll even group this cloner, make the bend deformer inside, face this on X plus, because that's now that orientation. That should face this direction. And honestly, I don't even need to match this box entirely. I guess that dot doesn't control the length anymore. I'll increase the strength to 360 and change the angle to 90. And as long as I lengthen this X, probably X, nope, I guess it's Y. So if I increase Y long enough to be the length of the entire cylinder, I am now deforming the end result that we had from the rest of it. Meaning, if I deselect that and hit play, that is going to now be twirling around and we're deforming the end result of it. So now we get this lovely tube spinning around, and that actually just sort of works. Now, if we wanted to just pop in my head, that might look nice if I taper this a little bit. So we could create a taper that will go before the bend deformer. Also, on X plus, hit fit to parent. The fit to parent actually is not going to adopt its geometry shape. I wonder if I put in the connect directly, if it will. It needs to be a child. So if I put that into the connect and then say fit to parent, it will automatically find that. So I do that pretty often. So just adopt the shape and then pull it back out again. So now the taper is the full length. I could taper that down to whatever extent I want. I could say no curvature, so that it just gets thinner as it gets longer. And then the bend can bend that. And now you can see that tip is definitely gonna be smaller. And I could even overshoot the bend. So increase this to an even greater strength. So now they will fully interlock with each other. And you know, if we wanted this to be centered, just grab the overall null and move that in the center. Hit play, and now we should have an infinite twist of whatever shape we want, twirling around, but yeah, anywhere we want by deforming it in all these different directions. Pretty cool. I like it. Does that answer the question? Oliver, thanks. Well, when it comes to cinema and this kind of thing, there's so many different ways of approaching it. Like there are probably a bunch of different things we could have done to make this. We could have done a different method just popped in my head where we could create a helix, and the helix could be bent around, and we could be cloning different leaves directly onto the helix, or doing a spline wrap of a series of them into it. There's a lot of ways of combining, and I've just played with Cinema 4D for so long and spent so much time in it that I've got a lot of potential recipes in my head, and it's all about combining them in new ways. So that's what I really like to do. Needs to flick out as it turns. Does it get bigger, or what do you mean flick out? Let me look at the reference again. Is there something? I mean, it does not flick out. These just spin, and then suddenly, I guess not so much. I guess some of the leaves are implying that they're starting to like flip outward. And man, those ropes are really nice. But there's no reason that those ropes couldn't have been part of our same geometry right here. That would be pretty simple to put in. But yeah, along those lines, you can just imagine putting in another bend and then bending out the tip, and those tips could come out. Those were all lined up a lot more nicely. They were also a lot skinnier. Yeah, they were a lot skinnier, and then there was a lot more of them. So already, yeah, just by doing that, it already looks so much more like that reference. And we could take the bend. I'm not going to keyframe these, but we could take the bend and start decreasing the strength. And so animating this, you can see how we could immediately get this twirl out. They can all bend outward. And that's just using our existing bends. You can see how they could all begin to explode. And just to throw it out there, because it's super duper simple, if we take our original shape, if I were to, let's say, create a cylinder and lay it on X plus, no caps. And once again, being real sloppy, eyeball this to drag it into the center, make it big enough to kind of capture it, make it longer to sort of capture it. Look at our geometry. I'll subdivide it a few extra times. Once again, I'm doing the simplest possible version. Throw that cylinder into the atom array, not something I typically use too much, but now you can see I've got that kind of like cage shape. As long as the cylinder is somewhat matching the radius, or possibly even intersecting a little bit, but you know, as long as it's sort of matching, then this could join the object getting deformed. So now I could taper that, bend that, and that cage will also get wrapped around in it as well. It seems like we're stretching it a little bit, but yeah, you can see how you can make that shape also match. We'd probably want some extra subdivisions in there. But yeah, you can create that cage as well. And once again, I don't like that shape too much. I will turn it off. But once again, you can see that if we were to animate our strength, we could get those to flip out to whatever degree we wanted to. And that, I think, that covers the fun parts of this one. And to spend too much more time on it would be to not answer more questions. And we still have a lot to cover. So let's name this one as number 2. I guess it's only the second question. We spent a decent amount of time on the Venom thing. Leaf, fly out. Alrighty. A lot of people really like Meeks's question, which is really fun. Yeah, Chris on YouTube is mentioning that that motion design award website. There seems to be a lot of really cool looking stuff in there, so I'll have to check out this website in general. I was not familiar with it. So Meeks, I appreciate everybody who's kind of seconding somebody's question that you're giving them credit. So Meeks has a question about this. What do we got? It's an effect called, I believe, server error, which for a second I was like, oh, it's not working. Retoka? Whoa. Is there, well, first of all, server error. Is this server error by Retoka? Oh yeah, okay, so that seems to be the studio. So giving them credit. Is there some sort of motion that we're looking for? Or is it just this overall shape? Because I gotta tell you, I'm not, I guess that is geometry. Oh yeah, there's a kind of their 3D model. I'm feeling a lot of post effect in here, like a lot of time in Photoshop. These, is there no motion? The motion would actually be very explanatory to me, but see, looking at this image, I just think Photoshop. And then a very basic, let me show you. I mean, let me go into the content browser. Go into, not that menu, objects 2, sculpting bases, grab a face from here. We'll grab the generic, let's grab the male bust. We always grab the female bust. We'll do this one. So as a very basic thing, I think that what we're looking at as far as any 3D component would be concerned would just be a very vertical stripy material. So opening up this sculpting base material is fine. Turn off reflectance. And then I guess all we need is the color channel. Under alpha, create a whatever we want. In fact, we can do it incredibly simple. I'll create a gradient and select the knots and then twirl it down, set that to step. So now you can see it's black, white. All right, so that's black and white. Now I would like a flat projection. So grabbing the bust, grabbing the material. We have the material selected. You see it's got a big old projection, T for scale, scale that down. You see it's mapped onto it. Now go to tile and say 11. Let's do 22. Let's do 44. 77. There you go. 77 stripes. This is in the alpha channel. Soft. Yeah, I'll turn off soft. Are we seeing through it? It's not actually showing transparency for us. I'm going to attempt to put it under transparency just so we can see in the viewport. It would render correctly, but I want to see in the viewport. Why is it acting like there's two meshes? Do I not have some display option that I need? High quality noises. No X-ray, yes materials. Transparency. There we go. I didn't have transparency on. So now you can see that I get all these nice stripes. We can tile that as many times as we want to. Even now it feels a little small. 111. There you go. So now we start getting those a little bit smaller. We could even potentially do some sort of like back face culling or make sure it only shows up one side of the material. Let's attempt a back face culling. Don't do that too often. Yeah, so now I'm only seeing the front of the face, and then we get all these little stripes. Now everything's going to look very flat from the front, but as we zoom up, or if we turn to a side, we're going to begin to see the curvature on it. So as we, it's starting to look like Thanos. Yeah, so now you can see that implied curvature starting to peak out a little bit. And if we look at this as reference, you can see how it feels very, very flat. But then once it gets up to the curvature of the head, there's like a little bit of a twist. But even having said that, you can see how these feel like they're traveling down, and you get a little bit of a curve for the edge of the face, but then they shoot out outside of that. But once again, to me, that starts feeling like that's probably Photoshop. There's physical geometry on the eyelashes, and you see the materials are pretty much passing straight through it. And because we're at an angle, you're seeing some of this more interesting definition pop out. And I suppose based on what I'm looking at there, well, you'd probably manually paint it, but it also seems like there's some sort of Fresnel effect layered on top of it. Let's see if we can get that to show up in the alpha. I'm a little doubtful, but if we say fusion, throw in a Fresnel, and now you see it gets fuzzy on the edge. We want the opposite, so I'll invert, pull up the black, nope, pull up the white. Actually, I'll just grab the midpoint, pull this up more. You see it gets very transparent everywhere except for the edges. And the hope would be we can screen. Yeah, by screening that, we're getting the least of both of them, or well, the stripe and then the least of where we're seeing the curvature. So now you can see we only get these highlights like on the edges appearing, and anything that's very flat and frontal to us won't show up very much. And that just starts turning into your raw material. Combine that with really interesting colors, you know, a lot of luminance channel, and immediately I'm starting to see sort of those shapes emerge. The amount we're going to be able to see in the viewport is not going to be everything. I'll turn off backface culling, and another thing we can layer up inside of the fusion. Copy shader, go into the shader, paste. Another thing we could feed in would be normal direction. So the normal direction could also be something. Does that work? Wow, okay, that I didn't think that would work in the viewport. What's actually happening right now is we're only seeing the inside normals. You know how a normal has a front side and a back side, being usually orange or blue. We're actually seeing the blue one, so the inside. So it's actually backwards. You can see that we see the nostrils, but not the rest of the face. We're actually seeing the inside of the face and not the outside, which is pretty cool as an effect. If I change this to multiply, then we'll get more what I was... Is it multiplying? Maybe we would invert these. Yeah, there we go. So now I don't see through to the other side. I only see the frontal side. We don't see the inside normals. And it's just different ways of combining the effect. I don't expect the render is going to be very different from the internal part because we're layering up a bunch of shaders, and the viewport won't know what to do with them. But the renderer does. We hit render, you now see these lines from the face. And I mean, in my mind, this is the raw material that they're using in 3D. So you can make as many stripes as you want. And then you're going into Photoshop and spending time colorizing things and overlaying different lines. Is there more to it? Possibly. Like, is this some sort of geometry that actually physically continued? Entirely possible. In addition to that, we're using transparency. There's a chance that we could do some sort of refraction on it. I have no idea what the end result. Yeah, we're going to get this big old sphere, refractive sphere showing up. It's not really doing much in fact, but I suppose with the normal the way it is. Actually, out of curiosity, I'm just curious. If I were to flip these colors back, what would the refraction do here? Yeah, look, see, this is kind of cool because we're not seeing the front of the face, we're seeing the back. So the entire thing is getting refracted and we're getting these really cool effects through it. So if I were to take that and, you know, start increasing our brightness of our color inside of it more, we're going to get some crazy effects. So that's kind of fun. Look at that. I'm not sure when I ever would have made something like this before. So that's kind of cool. In addition, you know, you could always get like really cool colors. In fact, this is just the luminance channel. Everything's very vertical right now. So I could just make a noise and type in 0 on Y, X, Y, Z, and now it's infinitely tall, and crank up normal on there. So now we've got these very vertical stripes. And if that were to be put into a gradient, hopefully I can grab a preset. We'll just grab a rainbow. And I guess we're tiling a lot, but that should be fine. Oh, this is just a gradient. I wanted a gradient map. That's my fault. Sorry. Noise, infinite, put that into a colorizer. Sorry, I've been doing too much Photoshop. Now that gets the gradient. Load preset, rainbow. So that will colorize these colors. They're getting colorized by this vertical stripe, and then those will get refracted. If we crank up our contrast, we should get more of the colors. And that can multiply by that brightness, and now we should get lots of crazy color. Oh, and that should become white for a full multiply. Now we get all these crazy colors, and we could control the gradient and how bright it gets and everything from there. And that's pretty much as far as I'm comfortable trying to push, even conceptually. This at this point, it's just like exploring and playing with shaders and getting some really neat looking different things, and then spending time in Photoshop. And different refraction layers is probably going to go a long way here. That's this really nice looking bubble. We could say, don't worry about total internal reflection or exit refractions. Yeah, so now you see we won't get all those extra layers on top. Let me turn them back on. You can see it's pretty clean right now. Turn them off. A little bit messier. So we could turn those off for more cleanliness. And you've got your different layers of refraction. So if I were to, let's put it down to 1, so there's no refraction. You see almost perfectly vertical stripes, except where we get the distortion of the actual rotation of the head on the edges. And if we put this up even to 1.1, we're going to start getting distortion, and pushing this crazy, we can go up to like 2. And the more you push it, the more these will deform into interesting different shapes. And you'll probably get different parts of the face jumping out depending on how far you push that. So let's see. Yeah, this is a fine place to leave that one. Hopefully that mostly answers some of the question. I think there's a lot of work done in post on that one. But I could be completely off. Maybe they did something completely different. That's just what I'm going with. I think this is a very good time to do a Recall demo and then give away a free copy of Recall. So first of all, if you're not familiar, Recall is a plugin developed by me and my brother over here at Rocket Lasso, and is a workflow tool in order to save the current state of your object. And it does a lot, where in Cinema, you know, you have like the pose manager. We've got the pose tag rather. Formerly the morph tag, and then you have the new pose library, but those can only change existing parameters. You also have the take system. The take system can only change parameters that are already there. When it comes to Recall, let's jump open a scene file. When it comes to Recall, we can store the current state of the object. So I'll make this, actually, I'll leave this cube here, right click and say, okay, Recall tag, double click. So that's all you have to do for Recall. It has now stored the state by hitting double click. It's the same as clicking the store button. So with that stored, I could say, okay, now I'll make this editable. And you see Recall is still there, but I could select all of my polygons, hit I for inner extrude, do an inner extrude, do an extrude. Okay, now we've done that. So let's say I want to store the state of that. Well, what I would do is copy the Recall tag again and click override. You'll see it automatically generates a different color. Now what's cool is I can double click on the first Recall tag or the second Recall tag and jump between these two different states. One of them is parametric with parameters. The other one is a fully changed model. And we could keep on doing this and layering them up, more and more and more changes that we want to make. Do a quick loop selection, I for inner extrude, D for extrude. We can keep on modifying things. I'll make another copy of Recall. And then actually there's a shortcut. If you hold down Control or Command on the Mac, I can double click the Recall tag and override it again. And now I can jump between those 3 different states. Now, this is not limited to just this object. It is actually going to control the entire hierarchy of the object. And there's lots of controls here for like renumbering things. So you can see 1, 2, 3. We could letter them. There's a notes tab. So I could go into the notes and say, okay, this was recorded at this time, but I would like to get a reference of this. So how about we render the view? And now we have a thumbnail of what that one is currently storing. So all that is pretty fun, pretty neat. Let me jump to R22 because I actually don't have the new Grayscale Gorilla plugins installed because I don't have access to the R23 version yet. But I do want to show you a little demo about it. So here is a character that I've been working on. This is this little robot guy. This is Benson. Let me give this a second to just refresh the materials. There we go. So here's Benson. It's a little walk cycle. I haven't really finished him up yet. I'm trying to do this animation where he's splattering himself with a bunch of ink. But I'm still doing tests on that. So here is the character. Now, the first thing I'd like to show you is, this is redshift. So if I were to, and let me know if it gets really laggy, everybody. If I were to pop open the redshift renderer, so the redshift render view, and hit play, we can now see this rendering. This entire thing is lit and the materials are all redshift materials. So I'll give it a moment to initialize the IPR. Okay, took a second, but there we go. So that has popped in. I'll go a little bit later in the frame. So just to show you, Recall works with plugins. So in this case, I want to change the lighting here. I want to do different experimental lighting. So how about we try using a different plugin? So I'll use HDRI Link. This is a plugin from Grayscale Gorilla that me and my brother also developed, and it is used to control different lighting. So if I were to drag the dome light into here, all the lighting is now being controlled via HDRI browser, so it's really quick and easy to select different looks. So you can see that we get really great fast feedback here in the viewport. Actually, I think the dome is really bright right now, so let me drop that back to the default of 0. There we go, that's a little more reasonable. So let's say, oh, I really like the lighting of that one, but I want to keep on exploring. So how about I right click and add a recall tag, double click and store it. And now let's keep on going through and selecting some different lighting. Let's go to my favorite ones. I'm a big fan of botanical gardens. I think it always looks really nice. So clicking on that, I probably should, for this demo, I'm going to say go to preview. This is on HDRI Link, so they'll just load in quicker. So now it's like, I really like the lighting of botanical gardens. I always have. I'll copy my recall tag. Sorry, I got a lot of windows open here. I'll override that one because I like the look of that one. And then how about we do Derelict One, another one of my favorites. Make sure I have the tag selected, Derelict One. And it's like we go through, be like, that one, no. Ooh, there we go. I like that one. So now I like that one. I'll make another copy of the tag, override that one. And I can just keep on going through and finding different looks. Let me change this to show all. Go down and find like lots of HDRs to choose from. Keep scrolling around, scrolling. Oh, I know I liked the look of this one. So this is a roller rink. So make sure I have the correct plugin selected. And there you can see how that's lighting. I really like the blue and the orange on that one. So like, okay, I like the look of all of those, but I don't know which one I liked best. Well, let me go ahead and close that window now. Be like, okay, did I like this one? But let me double click this recall tag. And it jumps back to the state at that time. Double click this recall tag. And I can quickly jump between all those different lighting settings, and it will work with different plugins. You can see it working on the Redshift Light. You can see it working with HDRI Link. It works with X Particles. It works with any object in the object manager. So that's pretty cool and important. In addition to that, I really love using Recall when it comes to cameras. How many times have you done this where it's like, okay, I've got this camera here and that's my camera. I want to keep this. This is the shot. And it's like, and then later you're like, oh, I need to adjust this pencil here. So let me go ahead and go and zoom up and then make some changes. And you're like, oh no, I accidentally changed. I forgot to delink from the camera. So I don't have the original position again. And you're trying to hit camera and you're like, oh man, like undo view. Shortcut is Control Shift Z. It's like undo. I guess I have to link to the camera. Undo. Oh, actually, it's not doing it. But there we go. Now I'm undoing. Undo. It's like, oh, there's my camera angle. Or was it that? Or was it that? Or was it that? Like, oh, it drives me crazy. I do that all the time. Well, now we can use recall as part of this workflow. So in this case, I could right click, add a recall tag, and just double click. I have now stored the state of that camera, all the information about it. Now, what's great about this is typically you do something like use a stop tag to stop you from moving it. Or what my usual workflow was recording some keyframes, but there was always a chance that I would keyframe the position but forget the rotation, or I would zoom my camera up, or I would just make other changes that would mess something up. But now you can see that I created that recall tag, but I am still completely free to go and move around all over my scene, do whatever I want, adjust a pencil, change something, and be like, okay, I want to go back. It's like, oh, I moved my camera. Well, it doesn't matter because I can just double click on recall and jump right back to where it used to be, to this current state. Whatever it was when you stored it, that's what it is. But the workflow gets a little bit better after that still, because we can do multiple camera angles. Let's lower our camera down here. Actually, let's just do one on this angle. So I'll zoom my camera up to some other position. Be like, all right, I also like this shot. That might be a shot that's in there. So let's make a second recall tag, override it. And now I can jump from the first position to the second position, just jumping back and forth between those tags. Having done that, I can jump to the first one. And how about we do some, actually, let's get pretty fancy here by picking a position like that. And then right click on the camera, add an animation tag, say target, and I want to target something. Specifically, I go into the character's controls, grab the body. So now I'm looking at the body wherever it goes. So if I hit play, now it's following the character as he walks around. So that's working nicely. But keep in mind, look, we just changed things. We just added a target tag. Well, let's duplicate one of our recall tags just for the workflow. We can also create it new if we want. Right click, recall. Double click. I like making them in the order that I created them. But now I've stored that state. But I could be like, you know what? Let's go back to the second one. And there we go. We're on the second one. It's just exactly where we left it. Go back to the new one. And now you can see we're back on the version with the target tag, automatically jumping us to the camera, automatically changing the camera position. And as a final little bit on this demo, why don't we animate the character up to somewhere like there? I will double click on the first camera angle because it's closest to what I want. And let's zoom way down here. I'll even select the camera and tilt it upward, maybe move down. I just want to frame up the pencil and the character, zoom out a bit. Okay, we'll do that. And now I want to keyframe it. So I'll say keyframe and then hit play, let a few frames go by. And then at this point, I want this to be rotated up and over a bit. So he looks super giant. Keyframe that, hit play, let that animate some more. And then finally we'll end up somewhere like that, just as a few keyframes, and I'll keyframe that. Now, how about creating another recall tag, overriding again with a simple double click workflow. And now I have an animated camera. So if I were to jump to this time, you can see that this camera is animated. We got these keyframes. So that is now stored in this recall tag. So I could always go back to my first camera position, and you'll see if I select the camera, look, there's no keyframes. There are no keyframes on here. There's no tag on it. Double click the second one. Now we're on the second position. Let's double click on the target tag one. Now it's back with the target tag. And finally, double click on the one with keyframes. Go to the time where it's actually keyframed. And now our keyframes are back onto the camera, and that is able to move over as well. And then at any given point, if it's time to send this out to, if it's time to send it out for different scene files, I could create a second camera. So here's a brand new camera. And I could be like, you know, okay, that camera, that should be the animated camera. So I'll actually just move the tag onto this one, move to this camera, double click, and that camera will now take on those properties. So if I were to rewind and hit play, then now we got those keyframes copied over to that camera. I could actually turn anything I want into a camera. This is kind of funny. If I were to make a cube, and there's a giant cube in the scene, I could move this cube up. And if I take one of our tags and copy it onto the cube and double click, that cube turns into a camera. So it's kind of funny. You can turn different objects into different ones. Now there's a lot of demos. I've got a bunch of videos here on the official recall page. Lots of videos you should totally check out. Not that video, but the, well, that video is fine. It's a commercial. But this quick start and use cases shows you like a dozen different use cases for it. And I think it's really, really good. So I'm going to drop a link for this into the chat. The best way, if you like my live streams, if you like the tutorials that I create and I put all over the internet for free for everybody, if you want to support it, the best way to support it is to buy Recall. That is a tool that you can use to improve your workflow, to speed everything up, and it helps support what we're doing over here. Our full-time job is to create tutorials and to create tools for everybody out there. So that's the best way to support. There's also Patreon, and supporting on Patreon is great. You get scene files and whatnot. And actually, if you do support on Patreon, then you can get a discount code for Recall as well. But right now, I think it's time to give away a free copy of Recall. So here's the way I'm going to do it. I'll actually jump this back up on the screen. So we've been doing this chat all over the place, and I'm going to select all the chat. I just copied all of the chat. And now I'm going to jump into, oh, I didn't have it on the right window. Give me a moment. All right, I'll pull this over. So here is a randomizing app. So I just pasted all those chats. On YouTube, I'm going to select copy everything and also paste it in here. Now, what I'm going to do is we've got all the chat that's happened so far, and I'm going to hit the randomize button. And when I hit the randomize button, whichever name whoever's name is closest to whichever name is at the top is who is going to win. That is our plan right now. Now, you see, I've got other things like it says stream chat and moderator prime and all that. So once we actually see it say somebody's name, that's what we're going to, that's how we're going to choose it. So hopefully everybody is ready. Let me make sure that this is up. We'll see how this goes. Actually, let me pull the Twitch chat back here. And now, okay, so now, based on the amount that everybody has been chatting, is essentially been the number of entries that you get in here. So once again, the name from the top is the one we're going to go with. I will click randomize, and they will get a copy of Recall. So let's give it a go. 3, 2, 1, randomize. Dean from NYC, you have now won a free copy of Recall. Do you already have Recall? I think there might be a chance you already have it. Actually, Dean, you talk about Recall all the time. You already have it, don't you? I'm pretty sure Dean already has it. So we're gonna have to re-randomize. Yeah. Okay, Dean, we'll have to figure out something else for you. If you're not already on Patreon, I'll give you a free, you can get access to everything on Patreon or something. So, okay, we're gonna re-roll again, I think, because Dean already has it and I super appreciate it. Or Dean, what you could do as an alternative is just remember, and I'll remember when you say it, hit me up whenever we launch our next plugin and say, hey, I won Recall, but I already had it. So we'll do that. So let's re-roll UV unwrapping demo. So I'm going to re-roll this again. I'm going to hit randomize, and whichever name comes up at the top again, we'll give it a second go here. And here we go. 3, 2, 1, randomize. Oh, it's Iloe, who I think is their first time hanging out today. And let's see if they're still here on Twitch. Iloe, are you here? Newcomer. Let's see. Are they still here and paying attention? I didn't say it beforehand, but typically our rule is you have to be present to get it. So let's see if they're paying attention. Oh, there they are. Yay. Okay, they are here. You've won a free copy of Recall. Good job. Congratulations on your first time hanging out in the stream and winning. In a little bit, we'll be doing a giveaway, the big giveaway, which is going to be a copy of Maxon One, which will be a 1-year subscription. So we're going to do another question here, and then we will try and tackle that. So contact me separately. You can, you should join the Slack channel and then send me a message directly there, and we'll figure it out that way. But yeah, that'll be the first pass, and we'll do this again a little bit later for the copy of Maxon One. Excellent. Okay, thank you, everybody. Let's move on. Let me make sure I've got R23 open and move on from here. Let's see. There is joining late. Yeah, you're never too late, Blue Tone Blue. We're still going. We'll probably go a little bit extra today because I did like a Recall demo. I don't want to jip people out of question time. Dark Bane has a Vimeo link. We already did a Venom thing, so let's try and do a Bane thing. Now let's see. Vimeo link, 15 seconds in. And let's see, you ask something a little bit more specific. Oh, we got another torus shape. How do you rig and animate procedurally expanding and contracting part while the shapes are tightly stuck together? Let's see what we got here. Flat White Motion, sounds like a studio name. And let's see what we've got here. No audio turned on, which is good. Let's see, nice and abstract. Whee, whoa, oh, that's cool. That it was like simple and suddenly went crazy. Now you're asking about 14 seconds in right now. Yeah, okay, so it's kind of like this tightly packed idea. Well, even just kind of those shapes changing in general. Yeah, animate and expanding the contracting part while the shapes are tightly stuck together. Let me think of the different ways we might approach this, because because the way I would do that, how would I go about doing that? Because I have a little plugin I tinkered with a long time ago that made grids, and I would just lock that to a particular cell of the grid. Oppo. Is Flatworm Motion, did Oppo make it? I don't want to be misattributing. A lot of this looks like it could be a 2D effect. I don't know that that is actually 3D. We've kind of talked a little bit about tricking or doing a version of that with dynamics, which is kind of a fun way of doing it. So I might attempt to do that, but all those shapes are so particular. A lot of that just feels... I'm trying to... The way it layers up is so particular. Now you'll see that the part that's vibrating is actually quite limited, but... but see, like lots of different lines are animating there. Now the way the shapes are moving, I wonder how much we can. I wish I don't have signal in R23. It's almost making me want to go to R22 because signal would be a good way of keyframing that, but we'll manually do it for now. Things will squish, but let's see what we can do. We're going to treat this very two-dimensionally, so I'll view it from the top actually. So there we have a sphere, and instead of making materials, we'll just do this in the viewport. So I'll say on and set different colors as we go. So there's a sphere and it is a radius of 100. So if I were to make a cube, it should be matching pretty well. I'll move it up exactly 200. And then let's copy and paste. Actually, it's very two-dimensional. So we can even do things like create a spline. So here's a spline and I'll move the spline over here. I'm holding down shift. So once again, that should lock in pretty well there. Yeah, so that you see how that matches that shape. If I were inclined, I could copy and paste this rectangle, make them both editable, and turn these into triangles. So this one can shift over to there. And this one will shift over to there. So I have two triangles now. And you can see how it's almost like a little Fibonacci sequence type of thing where we are, let's see, I'll do a cylinder shape. This will be weird. How big is that now? The rectangle was probably, that was pretty big, 400, 200, 600, which would divide by 2, 300. Z plus, there we go. So that's what I wanted. So you can see I can make a cylinder shape there, and it's kind of curving around, and that should once again perfectly fill in that space. So you can see how I'm kind of repeatedly going through and filling in the voids. Scoop that once again, even numbers, 200. This one, push it up on Z, and let's make the radius 200, make the height 600 now? No, 400. No, 500 apparently. Yeah, so you see I'm trying to be kind of precise with this, and all these pieces are filling up their shape, and you can keep on making them larger and larger and larger, and of course the simple one would be a cube. So that's just to start out and like fill up this space. So this one, man, how wide are we getting now? It's probably 800 wide. So I'm just being very careful in filling in the space like this. So you can imagine doing that. I'll also copy and paste the cube just to make another one down there, just so that the sphere is kind of filled in. So let's just say the sphere is our focal point here. Here's what I'm thinking. Does that work? It's really particular in the way it's designed, because what I'm thinking is that you'd start scaling things based on a series of nulls. So I could make a null and scoot it here into the corner, perfectly in the corner. And if the sphere were to become a child of that, but not just the sphere, I could take the, yeah, tricky. Yeah, it's not all the simple things I think I can do. I don't actually think I can. Because if I were to put the sphere in that, I could scale the sphere down. You see, that independently will scale. But then where it's going to get interesting was we could take the cube and also make it a child of the null. So now that cube will scale down with it. If we go into object mode, I can scale on each axis individually. So you can see I could scoot that down, and that's fine, except everything else would need to scale to compensate for it. So like that shape, I don't think I could scale very well there. Now what we could do is scale it on Z, and then at the same time, we'd need a null to contain these two triangles, which it wouldn't be too hard. Let's make another null. And this one actually would probably pivot from here, holding down shift. I should be able to get it snapping pretty well. So as a for instance, this will record, I'll record the scale of that and the scale of that. So if I were to move forward 5 frames, I could say I want to scale this down to 50%. So that needs to keyframe. Probably good to use one of the auto keyframe modes. I just haven't used them enough to talk too intelligently about them. Now what I'm going to do is just eyeball it, but scale that one to fill in the space. So that was just eyeballing it. But now hopefully when I scale here, you can see that it looks like that shape is squishing the other one, but we have to be very particular with what, maybe this is pretty much it. So that is squishing that all right, and those can squish. Having done that, I'll go back to 0, create another null, and this one I can also put in the corner. So that one goes in the corner, and now I'll put both of these nulls inside of this new one. It'd be a really good idea to label things, but I'm not doing that. Creating another null, because we need a null every place it's going to scale. But this time I'll put a null up on this upper part, and that will contain the tube shape. So having done that, now that squishes in, and then in theory we should have it unsquish. So I can grab both of these, copy that keyframe to 10. So now it's going to squish down and squish back out. And then I'll give it 5 frames of pause. And now this null will start there, and this one will start there. Going 5 frames further, I can take this one. And now you see this null is containing all 4 of these objects. So scaling that one down to an arbitrary amount, keyframing that. And now this one needs to scale the equivalent opposite amount. There's a lot of eyeballing on this one, but you can see how that is working. So now if I were to select both of those, I should be able to duplicate that keyframe again. And now I can squish that. So you can see squish, squish. That works pretty well. And let's do one last one to kind of hit it home. And in that case, I'm thinking we'll make another null. E for move, hold down shift so I can snap to what I think is perfectly the corner. That will contain everything so far and the pill shape. And then it's scaling up from here. So that means this box is the one that needs to scale. So another null, and this will snap to that corner. That needs to contain this box, and the same thing happens again. So at this time, we'll give it 5 frames of nothing, keyframe the scale, 5 frames forward, T for scale, and you see I'm only scaling on one axis at any given time. So we'll scale that one down, keyframe it, and scale this one up, keyframe it. Now, something that's cool here is if we were to stay in this state, you can see, okay, now you see squish, 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 but all these other ones are still nested nulls, meaning if I squish this tiny right there, we could give it that 5-second pause again, but then essentially do the same animation we had done earlier. I'll just do it manually again. So in this case, I'll grab the cube sphere and actually we'll have it scale up this time. So I'll squish that upward, but actually we don't want to keyframe. First, we want it to be in the current state, and here's its partner, keyframe in its current state, 5 frames forward, and then scale this one up, keyframe, and scale this one down this time so it can be getting bigger and squishing the double triangle. We'll do that. So now you can see that we're in a squished state, and then it gets squished again. And even in spite of being there, we could do another, well, let's just go forward 5 frames. And now we'll return the other one to their earlier state. So this one, I suppose we'll keyframe that, and then keyframe that, move forward another 5 frames, and now put this back to 1, keyframe, put this back to 1, keyframe. So now you see that we were able to transition those different things scaled, and everything is continuing to match the entire way through. Is there an automatic way of doing this? Possibly. It's not jumping in the mind immediately, but you can see that this is actually doing it pretty well. And as long as you keep on nesting everything in a series of nulls, especially if you organize it, and even this would probably be something like 1A and 1B, and then this is now 2A and 2B, and you see how everything's going to be like neighbor, but inside one of them will be 2, and inside of that would be 2, inside of that would be 2, and you could start nesting everything from there as you go. And yeah, with everything sort of organized in that way, I could start manually squishing everything around in any way that I want to, and every null becomes a different squishing point. There's probably a way you could do this with, honestly, you'd have to start building espresso rigs that just do it and its neighbor at the same time. So would it be faster than this? Maybe. It depends on if, the time you have, but that's my thought. That is my thought. So yeah, it's not too bad. I think that is actually the essence of it. I don't know how they did it. I'd be curious if there's a more elegant way of doing it, but I think just nesting these actually works pretty well. Now, I think I would like to do, we're going to answer at least one more question from everybody. Well, one more question from the audience. What is this one called? I'll just call it Squish. We're going to answer one more question from everybody, but first I want to do a mini segment of Rocket Lasso quick tips. So here is, Signal would have been really great to use to keyframe there, Dean, but I want to do a quick tip. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, the fun part of the quick tip is the fact that I will be able to clip this out in the future. So I'm going to pretend it's kind of a very isolated segment once I actually get the file open. I need to go find it. File open. I think I made a new quick tip folder. I didn't put the file in. I put the file into scene file. And let me fix it right now. Put that up in the finale and then put that into quick tip. All right. Okay, everybody. So here's the quick tip. I've got a scene file prepared here, and it is really straightforward. A cloner with a bunch of different crate models inside of it, each stacked up with the same distance in the vertical Y amount as the height of the boxes. Our goal here, the point of this, is we want to make a bunch of copies of it, but we want to add maximum variation, but also maximum control on top of it. So how would we go about doing that? Well, in this case, we've got 10 in this stack, but I want to add some random variation in the position and the rotation. So in that case, pretty straightforward, creating a random effector. It's going to move everything around, which is fine. I just want a lot less of that. So I'll do 11 on X, 11 on Z, and 0 on Y, just to get a little bit of variation in the way that they're stacked. And then under rotation, just increase our H. Specifically, we can go up to 360 and get full potential rotation out of that. Now, this is a straightforward stack, and if we want to add variation to it, we can change the random seed. And every time we do that, we're going to get a different position and different rotation on each one. If we want to change the type of box that we see, we'd have to go inside of our cloner, and right now it's set to iterate, but instead of iterating, we'd say it should be random. So now each box is randomly getting placed, and there's a seed value here. So clicking on the different seed values, you can see that different boxes will appear in different spots. So that's pretty good, but I want stacks of this stack. I want a bunch of them. So in that case, how about creating another cloner? That cloner will contain this stack. Specifically, I would like there to be 10 across and only 1 deep. And we'll move them a little closer together. So we've got 10 stacks and they're all identical. What if we want them to be different? Well, we could randomize the rotation, but they'd all be identical as far as individual stacks are concerned. So the best way to get around this is creating a duplicate stack. So actually I will add the random effector inside of that null so they're associated with each other. And now holding down Control or Command, I can create a second copy of that stack. So there's 2 of them. By adding a dramatically different random seed, so right now you see the seed is really big, I'll drop it down to 1, very small number. And you see that every other stack is changing. You'll see it even better if I select its random effector and give it a different random seed. I'll put it at 2. So you can see that it's alternating to the stack where it tilts to the right, tilts to the left, right, left, identical going through there. So that's not exactly maximum variation. And we don't want to make 10 different stacks of this. Well, we don't have to. We can actually limit it to just the 2 and get unlimited variation. We do that by going into the cloner and changing the clone mode of this new cloner to not iterate, but to blend between them. So what's happening now is we are blending between these two identical stacks, but they have dramatically different seeds. So it's blending from the seed of 1 all the way up to a much larger number. Just to show you, I'll make this editable, and we'll see a whole bunch of stacks. And you'll see if I click on the first cloner, it's a seed of 1. The second one is a seed of 1,000 or 13,000. The next one is 27. It's double that amount. It's going to keep on increasing. So there is pretty much, unlimited variation. I'm going to hit undo a bunch of times. Unlimited variation between these two stacks of cloners because it's blending between those different random seeds, which is pretty fun right out of the gate. But we can push this even a little bit further by getting variation in the height of these different stacks. So currently we have a stack of 10 and a stack of 10. Instead, I want a stack of 1 and a stack of 10. So as we might expect, it is blending from 1 up to 10. And that's really cool. We can see that each stack continues up higher, and there is, again, maximum variation. There's no copying from one to the next. However, what if we don't want the stack to just be linear like this? Well, we don't want to keep on making a bunch of different copies of the stack again. So selecting on this top cloner, we can create another effector. In this case, keep it really straightforward. I just want a plain effector. Currently, it's pushing everything up into the air. I don't want that. But what I do want it to do is modify the clone. If you've never played with modify clone, you definitely should. And here is the way to do it. Increasing modify clone, you're going to see the stack is going to start out all the way down at our base one. As I move it all the way to the top, they're all going to be the top one being identical. So that's not exactly what we want out of the gate. But now this plane effector is doing something. We control how it's modifying the clone now through the fall off. Jumping into the fall off, I could create something like a random field. And as soon as I do, we now see random stacks of boxes, each one of them completely random based on its neighbor. Even though these top ones look similar, you can see that the second box, nope, it's different. And the way that one's rotated is different. They just coincidentally had the same box up top. Changing this random seed, we can get as many different layouts as we could possibly want by layering up different seeds. And we could even jump into our remapping and go in. Well, we could increase the min. And now you can see that no stack could be really small. The minimum is increasing. We could decrease the max. So they can never be that tall. In addition, my favorite setting would be going under contour, changing this to curve. And based on this curve, say how likely is any one of these to happen. So by cranking this way over, you can see that we're saying most of the time it's very likely we get a tall stack of boxes. And then we could move it over, and now it's pretty much even. But we could say, no, I want a little bit more likely over here, a little bit less likely there. So you can see how those can be modified. Now, that's fine. I will delete the random field just for a moment because let's talk about some other options. In addition, we could, inside the plane fall off, we can add something like a step effector. By adding in a step effector, you can see it's once again stacking left to right. But inside of the step effector, we have the remapping. And by changing the curve, under the contour, change a curve, we can now remap directly what these should look like. It's not the random odds that they happen to be a particular height, but the actual position they're trying to achieve. So by grabbing this well, essentially, watch, any shape that I make this spline, if I lower this down, then we got a bunch of short ones. If I raise it up, we got a bunch of tall ones, and we get that little transition in the middle. And I could scoot that around one way or the other. We could pull this back down again. We could raise that back up again. And you can see whatever I draw here is the shape of our stacks. Now, there is one small, I accidentally scaled that to be smaller, which is a little bit of a pain to fix. Right click. Frame all. a small problem you can end up with here is if I were to scoot this over, you're going to see that all these maximum tall stacks are identical. And the reason for that is we have reweighted, we have modified the clone to say all of them are at the maximum value. So they've all gone to that perfect tall peak. So one thing we could do is just make sure that there's a little bit of variation in there. As long as we just move it a tiny bit, we're going to get like unlimited variation. But if you don't want to worry about that, we could layer up on top of this step, just put a random. So this random set to normal, and it is randomly applying a value. Let's set this down to 1%. So now it is a 1% variation on top of the step that we had. So now that will bring back all the variation while we still have the ability to modify exactly how we want the stack of boxes to go. And essentially this line here, this spline control is going to map whatever our stacks of boxes are. So maximum control, maximum freedom, and without creating too crazy of a hierarchy. We just have 2 copies of it and we get maximum variation. Okay, that completes that. I know it's a little bit more than a quick tip, but there's a couple little things. It's definitely shorter than a tutorial. I wouldn't want to record that as a standalone YouTube thing. I will put, how do I do this? I suppose, well, I'll always keep the quick tip file in there. So you will also get that, you will also get this file if you're supporting on Patreon. Quick tip file, random stacks, and then that would just become, that'd be 1B, I suppose. Save. Okay. So yeah, that covers the little quick tip. Bing, back up in the corner. Pro Tools, it will not be edited as a single YouTube video. After I get a collection of them, I will like compile a collection of like 10 of these, and then that will live as a collection on YouTube. So yeah, I did a little bit of thought into what I wanted to talk about yesterday, and I was going to do like, it's almost like in the final state. I was like, oh, there's a bunch of good information in here. So yeah, I don't know if quick tip is the right idea, but it's, you know, around 5 minutes or so. Anyway, let's do another question from everybody. Sean, does this Stowe is asking if it blends any parameter, and yeah, I think it will blend any parametric parameter. So any positional information, any parameter you've got here, anything should be able to blend. That is what the blend does. The important thing is the hierarchies have to be identical. If I deleted this random effector from one of them, it would break. So I'd have to make sure I delete it from both of them. If I added a plane effector here, I'd have to add a plane effector there as well. They have to be identical. But after that, you can get maximum variation from them. Actually, I just stopped myself from adding in color variation as well. It just takes more time. Typo. Yeah. Okay. Just for clarity for everybody, this was actually inspired. Somebody had sent me a message on the Slack channel saying something about quick tips, and it kind of inspired me where it's like, okay, I think it'd be a good idea. It's really tough to come up with quick tips, but instead of sitting there and trying to come up with a ton of quick tips, if every time we're going to do an episode of Rocket Lasso Live, I think of one quick tip, that is very manageable. And so I can kind of sneak it in as a little segment per episode. So it's like, hey, everybody, here's something I think is cool. And then later I can clip all of those out and then combine them into a super video on YouTube. So I would just take that as a segment, put a title card, and be like, part 1, part 2, part 3. And then that's what that will become. So yeah, it is not meant to live just here. It eventually will live in a big quick tip compilation video. And the idea would be to do a series of quick tip compilation videos. I think it'd just be really good content. So, but it's also a little bonus for you here and seeing it way ahead of time, because especially with it being the season end, it's going to be months and months until we have all of them complete. But yeah, I guess it means like every 2 or 3 months of doing the live stream, there'd be enough content to create a compilation. So that's the idea. I'm excited for it. Yeah, and I wouldn't want any one of them ever take too long. Yeah, typograph, I don't disagree. I don't worry too much about the YouTube algorithm. And then it doesn't like short videos. So, and people love my compilation videos. So that's the goal. Okay, we are already over time, but we are totally going to tackle one more question. And then when the question's done, we're going to do the Maxon One giveaway. Jump up to the proper screen again, and let's answer the final question of season 2 of Rocket Lasso Live. Seeing if there's any call outs. Jezebel Bing Bong, we will save talking about scene nodes for the future. In fact, like I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a presentation for Maxon during their live stream during Adobe Max, and I will probably be talking about scene nodes a little bit there for sure. I'm certain I will. I just don't know how far we'll get. Let me see. It's tricky to, I shouldn't overthink this. Let's see, how would you go about creating this? Or is it just the part before it reaches the ground? Well, I have no idea what we're going to see, so let's see what it is. There's a question from Mick. We'll see if it seems cool. If not, I'll grab a different question. Just before it hits the ground is the question. It's 46 seconds long. I imagine we see it pretty quickly. This is Operation Teapot Turk from the Lawrence Liverpool National Laboratory, or laboratory. Let me kill the audio. Okay. Oh, so it's nuke. This is the shockwave from a nuke, or it might be the fireball coming from a nuke. You say right before it hits the ground. Yeah, just probably like this shape, like right there overall. I think we can tackle a little bit of the, I mean, we're not going to be doing like cloud simulations or anything, but if you just want to do something of the effect, I think we can talk about something like that relatively quickly. So we probably tackle another question after this. So one more question. Yeah. Leo. So we will tackle another question because this will only take a few minutes. He says it'll probably take longer, but let's do it really quick. I don't think we have to overthink it. Let's create a sphere, an icosahedron. We're going to need a lot of subdivisions. So let's jump this to, I'm not even going to, I usually go light, but let's go 222. So that's quite a bit. Very, very subdivided. The thought is this is going to be exploding outward. So we could keyframe, I'm trying to think of the way I'd want to do. There's a couple different ways we could layer things up. If I want to keyframe the radius here, or afterward, I'm not sure. Let's do the radius in the moment. So I want to deform. I'll do it with a plane effector. The plane effector will be a deformer inside the sphere. Set to deformation point. So we're now deforming the point. It's going to look crazy to start out with because it defaults to Y. We want it on Z. I'll put it at 50. You see, actually, this might work because we can inflate it from here as well. Having done that, oh, so we do want it to inflate. Under fall off, I will create a random field. So it's your pretty standard deformer set up in this type of situation. This one, actually something like that's probably not bad. Now we've got a random field, but I don't want it to appear everywhere. So I will create a mask on this random field, and under that mask, create a second random field. So here's something that's masking out the first one. The idea now is creating a different noise. In fact, we could keep the same one. I'll just change the random seed and increase the scale. And it's going to be a little bit hard to see what's happening right now, but I think we'll be able to see it pretty well once we remap it. I could go and remap it inside, but why don't we create a separate curve? So this curve is above it, and I can remap this by dragging over the floor. So this is like the minimum value. I'm saying that there's a lot less of it. And you see, as I pull it in, like immediately, look how it starts like emerging itself as sort of that nuclear cloud. So now you can see that we're getting randomness, but only where a different random says it's allowed. And it's got the slow fade out. If I were to pull this over, it's going to be like this really rough wall, this really harsh transition. We don't want that. We want that smooth transition between them. And now we see this. Now what's cool about this is we can kind of animate these two independently. Let's turn on, well, if I were to hit play, nothing's animating. This small one, I think we want to animate very quickly. So if we were to look at this nuclear footage, it's very quick. You can see that there's a lot of motion right there, but that overall shape isn't changing that much. So that is kind of what we want to aim for now. I think we want more polygons, so I'll subdivide even further. And this, we should name these. So this one is random field. I'll say random field small. Actually, naming them here does not rename them there, which in some ways is a good thing, but in other ways it's not. So I'll rename that small. And this one will be mask, I think. Yeah. So apparently if we rename it there, it renames it here. But if we rename it here, it doesn't rename it there. Not necessarily a bad thing, but not super intuitive either. In any case, there's no animation right now. If we were to grab our scale, actually not scale, just animation speed. Let's say it's a 55, which is not fast. If I hit play, now we've got a small noise animating around. Now, I'm trying to think. I probably want two noises, or we change the noise type. Currently, this is a Perlin noise, but let's grab something like a Luca. Lucas are a lot noisier, and immediately you can see that we're getting like all this extra motion overall, and that's not too bad. It might be a little small. I might start, yeah, I'm going to crank it up a little bit. So something like that. So that's not too bad. So we get that kind of motion. And I think, I don't know if it is actually the way we want to do it, but I could put a little bit of animation speed on this bigger one and a little, okay, a little bit more. There, now you can see how they're transitioning slowly across. I don't know if we want that or not, but you can see how that's an option. Now, I wonder if we can inflate this overall shape with staying within the fields is a thought. If we create a time, this will be interesting. I'm going to set the time to add and watch what happens. It's automatically going to be, well, let's look at it by itself. If it's by itself and I hit play, you see the entire thing is going to inflate and then stop. That is because we are currently clamped. If we say, because it's constant, this is adding everywhere. It's saying everything gets more power. Like what percentage is it being applied? Time is saying everywhere it's being applied more and more and more based on time. And over the course of 30 frames, it's going from 0 to 1, 0 to 100%. So if that is set to add on top of our base, then all this deformation is still happening, but then this is adding on top of it. So now you can see that will push outward, but eventually we'll get to these couple frames where it kind of squishes them out and they disappear. So we're kind of getting all this explosion animation pretty simply. We're getting that kind of for free, but we lose it at the end. That's as simple as this clamp. This clamp is saying nothing can go above 100%. So just by turning that off, you'll see the peaks reappear. And by hitting play, this will explode forever. That's going to continue expanding outward. And I don't know, I feel like that's kind of it. That's why I thought we could tackle this so easily, is how quickly we can change these numbers. So if we were to just frame ourselves up properly, set that to whatever speed we want. That's a little bit quick, but we can just change the time. I want this to take 90 frames. So now you can see it's happening slower, and we could change the speed of these different noises to be slower. And yeah, the overall effect is working surprisingly well. Then on top of that, I mean, we could do different random seeds if we wanted to see different peaks and whatnot, frame this up however we like. And then we could, well, first of all, you could just add more segments. Let's go 777. So it's getting quite subdivided, and maybe that's better. And but it will start slowing down, which is why I typically don't push it too far in a stream. And then the overall shape could be put into a subdivision surface. That's gonna be a lot. I'll set to 1 by 1. Even that will be a lot. So yeah, you see, yeah, it is smoothing that out, and it's looking pretty good. Hitting play, I imagine it's going to be quite slow, but that is what it is. It's doing a lot of calculations and smoothing a lot of shapes out. So fair enough, if that was what you're inclined to do. And then finally, let's just, if we look at this as sort of a material, that looks like we could probably get away with mostly just a simple Fresnel. So create a new material, double click, pop open your material editor under luminance. It's kind of self-illuminating. So under that, throw in a Fresnel. Now you get this backwards inverted coloring. Apply it overall. And we get that shape. Now, actually, yeah, I guess the reference, it's sort of light on the inside and dark on the outer. So we'll invert that. I guess it's the specifics matter. It kind of fades out to gray, and it's a lot more of a transition. So I might pull this up, yeah, up more like that, and it wouldn't get quite as dark. Yeah, I bet you the lighter we go on it, the better it's going to look. Actually, even that's pretty good. So we'll do that. Yeah, there seems to be a little something I'm not quite getting there, but yeah, I'm not sure. But that's, yeah, it's not bad. Turn off the subdivision surface. We'll be able to see something exploding outward. We also put a smooth on here if we wanted to, and every single part separately. And I'm so happy that it popped in my head like halfway through. It's like, oh yeah, we can use time, and that will just add on top of it. At any given point, we could also keyframe these little bits to be bigger or smaller. We could be keyframing the individual scale so that these could be more or less. We've also got this curve. We could keyframe this curve to be allowing those to grow larger or smaller as we go. And I don't know how the nuke looks all the way from the beginning. But we could, let's say at the beginning, it looks like that. Keyframe that shape, hit play. Well, I'll just go towards the end. As it goes out further, it's kind of like the sphere has been escaping the cloud. Ooh, that looks cool already. So if we do that, keyframe that, and let's see. So now as that transitions out, we're going to see the sphere start to envelop the rest of it. That's actually pretty cool. And yeah, so that can sort of erase it out there manually by us keyframing it. And I don't know, that feels like a nuke to me. So yeah, thanks for the question. That was a cool one, and did not take too long. Season 2, 36, the finale, scene files. If you are just joining us, you can get access to these scene files on Patreon, and that will be, I guess it's the mushroom cloud. Save. All right, now the official last question. I don't like having multiple choices to choose from. Like it's supposed to be one specific question or not. So I'm gonna go. Let's click on symmetrical. What do you got for me? How would you make a pre-animated object like this dynamic? Oh, that sounds interesting. Let's see what we got. Whoa. This is interesting. So this is from Evoked. We definitely have seen a question or two about his work before. Very creative with what they make. I'm assuming you mean this earlier part. Well, this actually, the basic idea of this is really cool. The basic idea of this is actually not too crazy. Actually, look, we can continue this from this one. So we've got our nuke. I just need to kill off a lot of these subdivisions. So I'll drop it down to 100, which should be somewhat reasonable. So we've got our nuke here. Let's make it a dynamic nuke. Creating a floor. I'll move it down. Yeah, floors don't seem to generate unless I turn off some sort of option. It's possible. I don't know. So, no subdivision surface. Sphere. Okay, sphere. You shall be a rigid body. Floor, you'll be a floor. And all we need to do is change the shape. Honestly, with this kind of shape, we don't even need to change it. It can be on automatic. So if I were to hit play, you'll see that this shape falls to the ground and it will actually move based on the shapes that it is. If I increase this time, you'll see that these little bubbles will push it around. I will make a plane, make it a child of the floor, reset PSR, because I want to see a shadow. We'll make it easier to see this. Whoops. Accidentally made that a child. Shadow. And display, no, option, shadow. There we go. And I don't want to see all of the shadow. Here. Actually, it's nice to put a second light. And the second light can be an ambient light. A little bit blue. A lot of it blue. All right. That was a bunch of setup, so you can see that your object can be animated. It can be deformed via whatever we want. So this deformer is bouncing around, and you can see it's actually going to push it around. We didn't even change anything else. I just threw the dynamics tag on there. So when in case of what we were just seeing with that other example, I'll save this one. I suppose it can continue to be the same question. Well, I'll make it another number. Just to make it a little more similar to what we were just seeing on the other one, if I were to make a cube, give it a decent amount of subdivisions, 55 by 55, none on Y, that could be deformed however we want it to. So in this case, I might, let's just steal the plane deformer's already got a lot of the info we want. So plane deformer, no time, get rid of the keyframes. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that's a bug. I just deleted. Oh, they still exist there. We'll just see. It doesn't matter. What was I going to do? No, we'll make a new random field. And that new random field, we can give it some sort of really strong length. So you can see I've got these lines, not completely unlike what we were just seeing in the reference. The thickness of that should be really skinny. And this probably shouldn't deform too much. So yeah, we can do something like that. And as long as we give it a dynamic tag, then that should fall to the ground. Oops, I kind of forgot that was going to appear in the same spot. Move away. So now you see that will fall to the ground, and it actually is. What's funny is it's passing through the noise as it moves. It's based on this field. Let's make it global. Actually, I think that none. Well, can't do none. I think that field would not move through space because it's actually moving with the cube. But actually, maybe that's what's causing the problem. It doesn't need to be a child. So let's see if it's static now. No, it still moves. Oh, I'll have to think about that more in the future. But all we need to do is give that some speed. Oops. Give that some speed. And we should see that go away. the nuke doesn't want to leave us alone. So by giving this some speed, you can see that it's wiggling around, it's moving based on that motion. So yeah, it's actually really, really straightforward. Anything we deform that with becomes part of it. I wonder if we could actually get that to like walk if we gave it the right orientation. Like if we keyframed the motion of this traveling through, if we could get some sort of walking motion. I don't know. I guess it's not as simple as you'd have to get, it just passing through wouldn't actually give you directional motion. I'm trying to think of anything more specific. Now that this could be two-dimensional. This could have been a plane, 55 by 55. That could be getting deformed and be dimensional. That could be flat. And then after the dynamics happens, throw on something like the cloth surface to not subdivide, but to give it thickness. So now the dynamics are happening prior to this, and then it's getting subdivided and smoothed after the fact. So the dynamic calculations can be really quick, and you get the thickness, and it's all very controllable. And all of that should just move. The way it's moving, I wonder if we could put it as a vertex map. I am curious about the space, the way it's mapping. And there could be a lot of things like that is based on the object. Whoa, that definitely changed it. Whoa, weird. Well, yeah, I'd have to think about that some more. But yeah, that's kind of the basics. That's kind of the basics of it. I'll save that one again. Here's like another quick one. So you know what? Let's try and sneak in one more random one. I'll scroll up. I suppose before we wrap up all the way, I should mention that I guess I mentioned earlier on, but we have a Slack channel. You should come and join the Slack channel if you're somebody who likes to be helpful and constructive and you have questions, you want to help people figure out their questions, then we have a really friendly Slack channel that has cool little contests and like drawing challenges and things like that. So you should join the Slack channel. You should be able to find a link below the video. So here is a link. And then, once again, if you want to support this, then the best way to support is by picking up Recall or by supporting on Patreon. In any case, let's check out the final question. Here we've got one from Bahavana. You picked one specifically, which is good. Yeah, if you give me more choices, I won't choose the question. Because the point here is the specifics of what somebody wants. Oh boy, this is a dangerous one. Well, it actually doesn't even go to being dangerous. It's not practical because there's a lot of work involved. Oh, I should pull up the screen. So this is a link to Craig Taylor, and I'm not sure. Analytical attempt at simplifying urban and rural expanses by modeling the built form. They're using Blender and 3D Max, but they're, how do you pronounce that? Is it GIS? Well, regardless, they're using a bunch of different softwares and they're creating a big city. Now, what's actually kind of funny is going back in the day, I had spent a lot of time developing something that could generate a city, and it never got finished. Let me see if I can find it. Give me a moment to search. I'll pull it up. Now there are possibilities with scene nodes to start doing some of this, but everything's going to be, it's really, really difficult to calculate. You couldn't parametrically make something like this too much because there's so many steps in the process. I had written over 5,000 lines of code, and I was actually getting something that is not unreasonably similar to this, but it was 5,000 different steps that had to be done. And that is never going to calculate quick. It's like a big thing that has to like calculate and process. And I do have the code, but I don't have it set up in such a way I could show it off easily. Now, having said that, there are a lot of ways of thinking about some geometry that we might be able to quickly fake something or make something reasonable. It's still searching. I'm not sure if it's going to find, I might have spelled it wrong. Oh, yeah, there's something sort of. Oh, don't disappear on me. Well, it's being weird now. I'll ignore the search because it's being a pain. All right, here's a thought. What if we created a basic shape? Let's make I'm going to go do a top view, and let's just draw a blob. So sketch, blah, 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 blah. Okay, there's a spline. Close it. That's just fine. Then create a loft. Ooh, did I find it? Open file, renders. Ah, I found it. Okay, so here is some renders of some of the stuff I had been doing. So you can see that it was like starting to generate a city pretty well, pretty randomly. And there's like a lot of options. Sadly, it never, the project just kind of dead ended, but yeah, it's pretty neat. So anyway, let's continue with us trying to make something reasonable here. So there is a blob and I put into a loft, so it becomes geometry. With it being geometry, I want to fill in the interior, let's say with a regular grid. That's a huge regular grid. I'll twirl this up and say, I guess it's a really big spline. And actually, I should leave it at 10 and just make my spline way smaller. It's going to be quicker if everything's a more reasonable scale. So there we go. So there we go. That's a good shape. So let's say we've got that. Currently it's, let's say, quad dominant. So make that editable. And now do something crazy like go to the top view and use the knife tool. K. Now I'm going to do a cut, escape, cut, escape, cut. And so I'm just kind of randomizing, you see. So I've done that. Select all. UR to invert. MG is the iron tool. And if I start ironing this, you're going to see that it's going to try and smooth itself out a bit. So you see how all of these are trying to, yeah, they're trying to be smoother. Now, so if you spent a lot of time with something like the knife tool or some sort of dissolve tool, actually, yeah, even that could be interesting. Essentially, you just want to create a lot of chaos in it. And it's really big. I'll shrink that. And now I'll turn that into an n-gon. Let's see. I want to untriangulate, create n-gon, apply. Yeah, so I did that. And now if I remove n-gon, then it will randomly connect these in different ways. There's a lot of potential for generating some different and interesting shapes. Actually, I could even, I don't know how far we can push it. Triangulate, select. Try that again. Untriangulate, apply. Let's see, MG, smooth that again. That can be interesting. And now remove the n-gons. Yeah, now we get more interesting connections. MG to smooth again. And then you can see every time I do this, you can see we're getting more irregular patterns. Now the outside of this is very messy. So I could do something like shrink my selection, UK. No, even just once was fine. UK, UI to invert. Now you see I've got this very messy edge. We'll just delete that. So now you can see I've got something a little bit more regular. If we want everything to be quads, we'd have to double the resolution. But if this entire thing goes into a subdivision surface of 1, then now there are no more triangles. Every triangle turns into this set of 4 quads, which can be really nice as well. And that becomes made editable. And then I would start doing something like selecting roads. So UL, let's go to edge mode. And I want to select some roads. So let's make that a highway. And I'm just trying to find some nice ones. I guess that's fine. You never know with what you're going to get on a particular layout, but there you go. Just some roads like that. So let's say that those are roads. At any given point, I'm probably going to like sort of hit a dead end here, but we'll just keep having fun. Set selection, MS to do a bevel. And if I hit MS and start dragging out, you can see that I'll separate those out and those become what could be a highway or some sort of road for us. So now we've done that. We need to select those polygons. If I hit shift and convert, it's going to select everything. If I shrink it by 1, it'll do a pretty good job of it. But I think if we go back to the original selection, then we have those. And then if we go to let's see, mesh conversion. No. Select, convert selection. It'll pop this open. And I want to convert edges to polygons and not be tolerant. And let's see, did that work? Yeah, that worked. So now you can see I've got those polygons selected. So that's kind of nice. And if I were inclined, I could separate those out. So I could hit UP, and that now becomes a separate model. I could delete those, and now those are separate objects. So I can hide that as a highway. So those all went away. Let's keep this as simple as I can. Let's just say all of these are roads. So let's see. This will get dangerous at some point. So number 7A, city. I for inner extrude, and I just want all of these to be roads. So I for inner extrude, don't preserve groups. I'm going to start pulling in, and there we go. Now these are not highways, so I want them to be relatively small. And now you can see that we've got all of those. So if those are now local roads, let's separate this out again, UP, and now go back to this original one, delete. So I think that should be correct. That's the land, that's the road. Yeah, so now we're just left with these plots of land. So now we're just left with these plots of land. We would want buildings on there. So I would be inclined to, like if I was doing this with code or with the scene nodes, and this would just be too complicated for building something quickly with scene nodes, but I'd probably want to like randomly select a whole bunch of different things and then say, okay, not those, but now all these other ones, right click and do a subdivide. And now you see they've all subdivided into these smaller blocks. And depending on what you were doing, you'd want to do a bunch of different selections on different things. But now you see we have some big ones, some small ones, and potentially we could even like go through doing more random selections. And a good random selection would do a better job. Hit UW, and now we could subdivide those again, subdivide again, and now those are even more subdivided. So with all of those extra subdivisions, we could do something like, we could do another inner extrude, which might be a good idea for like little local like driveways and whatnot. But this isn't going to be amazing. But I could hit I for inner extrude, and I guess I got to go easy on it because some of the triangles are breaking, or I guess they're not triangles, they're tiny quads. But yeah, so you'd have to do things to avoid that. But let's just ignore that for now. So now I've done that. I could split this out to another object again, UP. And then go back to the first object, delete, and now again, those are the buildings. So those are, once again, smaller roads. And now these would be our actual final buildings. We wouldn't want everything to actually be a building. So once again, you'd want to go through and deselect a bunch of things. We're not in such a good way to do that. But if you could randomly deselect a bunch of things, or if you want to spend a lot of time deselecting things, you could. And now we've got all these. Hit D for extrude, hit apply. All those extrude is pretty tiny, so those will go down to 1. We want offset variation and a whole bunch of it. So we can offset those a bunch and let those randomly push up and down. And then in theory, what I would do is deselect large swaths of it. So it'd be like, not you, not you, not you. Actually, I mean, like if this was code or whatnot, I do things with fall offs and whatnot, but we can imagine shrinking. Well, let's just say that there's some sort of downtown area. So we could deselect a bunch of stuff and say, okay, that's the downtown area. So we hit D for extrude again and extrude a second time, and then deselect once again, randomly a bunch of them, and then D for extrude again. And we could keep on shrinking our selection until we're finally left with a couple of buildings that are extra tall. And now that we've done that, you can see, I think, that we have a not unreasonable kind of city. And by doing little things like deselecting, like by doing those cuts and smooths and whatnot, you can end up with like interesting little areas like this. It's not perfect. Our selections weren't perfect, so I missed these tiny little areas on the road. But you can see how we get this nice rounded curve area, and we can end up with little population centers and buildings downtown and different subdivisions in different areas. And we've got these different, I could pull this back, and now we've got our highway, and that highway we could do anything we want with geometry wise, and you actually get surprisingly detailed with it. Like if I zoom up on the highway, I get I get D for extrude upward, I for inner extrude, and do a little inner extrude, make sure we're preserving groups, D for extrude, and push it down a little bit. It's like, okay, now it's got sidewalks. If we do it perfectly, we could probably do an inner extrude and even get like a little stripe down the middle, D for extrude, and pull that up for a little highway subdivision type thing. And then you can see we actually added a decent amount of little detail in what would have been our highway automatically when it comes to, and then if we were being smart, we could have made a bunch of selections as we were going, and we could have randomly selected some roofs and done inner extrudes on them. I think that I'm definitely probably going to do something like this with scene nodes at some point, just because I really love doing this type of thing. And you can see, but I mean, it'd have to be small because you can see all the work we just did. Trying to imagine something like scene nodes calculating all of that in any kind of reasonable amount of time, it would just be asking too much of the system. It's not fair to it to say, hey, do all that. So this is better. This lives better as something like a command plugin, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that kind of thing can be pretty neat. You can even go further where you might be able to get the extrusions based on, what's the right way of saying it? There's definitely ways in my head of pushing it further. But this is about as far as I think I will go here. But you see, like, if you go back to the reference we were just looking at, like we don't have this definitely, but this is not unreasonable. It's not bad as a quick bit of geometry everywhere. So yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah, and that's a fun one. Thank you very much for that question. It's a fun one to end on. And speaking of which, I think we are officially at the end. Thank you so much, everybody. It is time to do the final giveaway. So as I say that, I've already copied. It has already been copied, so you can't go spamming the going to the chat room. I will select everything in here, delete, paste. I'll do the same thing again in YouTube. Select all, copy, paste. So there's all the YouTube chat. There is all of the Twitch chat, or at least as much as it allows me to go back and copy. So we've got all, actually, yeah, it seems to have gone back to pretty much the beginning. So we're going to do the same process again. If you weren't here earlier, the process is going to be, you have to be here. If you're not here to say yay, then you don't get it. I'm going to hit the randomize button, and whichever name appears at the top, or if it's, saying something like stream chat or something, or somebody's sentence, then we'll ignore that. So the first username at the top will receive 1 year subscription to Maxon One, which is Cinema 4D R23, Redshift, and the entire Red Giant collection. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. Yeah, it should be good. All right, everybody. This is it. Thank you so much for hanging out for another season. I suppose just to tease it out a little bit, make sure you go and you subscribe to the YouTube channel. I've also got, actually, here, I'm going to tease it out a little bit, even extra. You should go to the secondary. Let's see. Let's go to Rocket Lasso Live. Yeah, YouTube. So there's actually two channels. There is the Rocket Lasso Live YouTube channel, which is our main one. All right, no, there's Rocket Lasso, the YouTube channel, and then there is the Rocket Lasso Live YouTube channel. So there's actually two different channels. So make sure that you also go to this channel, because this is where I post all the archives of the streams. So I'm going to post this to the chat, and you should subscribe there as well, because there are only 669 people on this channel so far, and a lot more on the regular channel. So more people need to go and check out the replays, because the main channel is now only for tutorials. So just throwing that out there. Okay, with that final little service announcement out of the way, let's go ahead and give away Maxon One. Good luck, everybody. So we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, randomize. Travis Ragsdale. Travis. Oh, well, Travis is on YouTube. Let's see if he replies. They're a few seconds behind, so we'll give him a moment. And yeah, Travis is a regular, so that's amazing. Yep, Travis, you did it. So you have won a 1 year subscription of Maxon One. Go ahead and, are you on the Slack, Travis? If you're on Slack, go ahead and just PM me, message me directly on the Slack channel, and I'll get your information and pass it on to Maxon. And ILO, make sure you contact me there directly as well. You can find me easily enough. Find me and I will get you a free copy of Recall. So thank you so much, everybody. It's really fun to do these giveaways. Another big thank you to Maxon for supporting me and the live stream and having a copy to give away to everyone. Thank you so much. Make sure that you follow on Twitch so you can see when I go live. Make sure you follow on YouTube. Make sure you join the Slack channel. There's a lot going on. Pick up Recall, please, everybody. We've got it's the first plugin. We worked really hard on it. We're working really hard on the next plugin. So that should be fun. I'll see everybody in January. There will be bonus streams still if you're supporting on Patreon at the some of the like the $10 tier. I'm going to be doing bonus live streams where I still try and record tutorials, new practice runs on things. So those will still be going whenever it is appropriate. But otherwise, I will be back for season 3 in January. It'll be nice to get the website finally put together and out there and continue working on stuff. That's going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be super missing you by the time the stream starts up again, but that's why it's important to have a break every once in a while. So that will wrap it up. See you next time. See you next season. That will do it for now. So bye-bye, everybody.